We're now live on YouTube.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Broadland District Council Planning Committee on Wednesday, the 24th of February, 2021. Thank you to all our officers who enable these virtual planning meetings to progress. Hopefully everything will run smoothly, but please be patient if we should find a few gremlins in the works. We will endeavour to resolve any problem as quickly as possible. Our meeting today will be recorded and the meeting will be live streamed for public viewing on YouTube. The recording of this meeting will also be available on the Broadland District Council website. You should be aware any comments made in this meeting will be recorded indefinitely. Please can I ask everyone in attendance to ensure that when your microphones are unmuted, that you should try to keep the background noise to a minimum. Background noise can be very distracting from the discussion and information being relayed throughout the meeting. My name is Councillor Sue Lawn, Chairman of the Planning Committee. I will now ask our officer to proceed to a roll call for other members of the Planning Committee. At this point, I will ask the members to address agenda item number 1, and please advise the officer if you should have any declarations of interest under procedural rule number 8. Thank you, Officer Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. So if members could confirm their attendance and give me any declarations of interest. Councillor Adams.
Present, and yes, I do have a declaration on the County Councillor for Drayton. And so in that sense, I sort of concerned with the highway issue. I have not taken part in any discussions.
Thank you. Councillor Beadle.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Present, no declarations of interest.
Councillor Fisher.
Present and no declarations, thank you.
Councillor Folger.
Present, no declarations, thank you.
Councillor Karimi Guvenloo.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Lawn.
Present, no declarations of interest.
Thank you. Councillor Leggett. You're on mute, Councillor Leggett.
Sorry, present, no declarations. Apologies.
Thank you very much. Councillor Prutton.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Riley.
Present, no declarations.
And Councillor Ward.
Present, no declarations of interest.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call on the declarations, Chairman.
Thank you. We also with me today are our officers and Helen Mellors, Assistant Director of Planning for Broadland and South Norfolk District Council, Ben Burgess, Central Area Team Manager for Broadland and South Norfolk, one of our presenting officers today, Matthew Rook, Central Area Team Manager for Broadland and South Norfolk, our second presenting officer today, Lee Arthurton from Democratic Services, who will be our host for today, and Dawn Matthews from Democratic Services will take and prepare the minutes of our meeting. Thank you to the officers. All members of the committee have received in advance paper copies of the agenda, presentation slides, and public written submission for these applications we will be considering today. At various points, if necessary, throughout the meeting, for example, in relation to questions and comments, I will do a roll call member to member in alphabetical order, requesting the committee members' input. Today, I'm pleased to confirm we have speaking for this planning meeting. Only members of the public who have registered to speak in accordance with the Council Scheme of Public Speaking will be able to address the committee. The time allocated is a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker per parish council. Please be advised this will be the only time our public speakers will be able to address the committee. I also have to advise you that there's no provision of members of the public to circulate documents or photographs at this meeting. The order of our meeting today will be as follows. The planning officer will present the key points for the application to the committee for their consideration. This will be followed by questions to the presenting officer from members of the committee in relation to that presentation. Public speakers will then be invited to address the committee. This again will be followed by questions to public speakers from members of the committee. I must emphasise these questions will only be to clarify something the speaker has said and not the speaker to put further points across. The order of public speaking is Parish Town Council first, followed by objectors, finally supporters, i.e. the applicant or the agent. Council members who are not members of this committee will then be invited to speak for the allocated time of a maximum of 5 minutes each speaker. This again will be followed by questions from members of the committee. The committee will then discuss and determine the application with the proposer and seconder for each of the applications we will consider today. Members will give their vote to the proposal by roll call, and our committee officer will relay the result of the voice of their votes to the meeting. We do not have any. Do we have any questions before we proceed? No? Okay, thank you very much. We've already addressed item number 1 on the agenda, so we'll go to item number 2. And Officer Matthews, do we have any apologies?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We've got apologies from Councillor Moncur, and Councillor Leggett is his substitute today.
Thank you. We will now need to take another roll call to confirm the agenda items 3 and 4. And Officer Matthews, if you could please address agenda item number 3 to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting from the 27th of January 2021. And agenda item number 4, any matters arising therefrom.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Officer Matthews.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Accept the minutes and whatever.
So minutes are okay and no matters arising.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you very much. Councillor Beadle.
Agree the minutes, no matters arising.
Councillor Brennan.
I did not actually attend as a.
Correct, thank you.
Member, so yeah, but no matters arising.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
All fine, thank you.
Councillor Folger.
Agree the minutes, no matters arising.
Councillor Karimi Guvenlu.
Minutes okay, no matters arising.
Councillor Lawn.
Agree the minutes and no matters arising.
Councillor Leggett.
Agreed the minutes, no matters arising.
Councillor Pratton.
Agree the minutes, no matters arising.
Councillor Riley.
Agree the minutes, no matters arising.
And Councillor Ward.
Agree the minutes, no matters arising.
Thank you, Chairman. That completes the members' matters arising.
Okay, thank you. And Officer Mellors, do you have any matters arising from those minutes, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would just like to raise under minute 168 relating to application 2020-1976, land adjacent to Sunny Acres Blowfield. We will be referring that back to committee because we have received additional information from Highways England. Members will be aware that that was outstanding. They are raising new material considerations that need to be taken into account before the decision is issued. We have notified the applicant, and at their request they have asked to be given time to consider this Highways England objection or concerns, and therefore we will be referring the application back to committee, and that needs to be noted in the minutes, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. We will now move on to agenda item number 5, schedule of applications. And members, we will have our first presentation for this morning, and it is application number 2020-0202, Green Lane, East Little Plumstead. Leah, can you please just confirm that we have our speakers for this?
Yes, we do.
Application in attendance. Councillor Vincent, Councillor Weimark, Andrew Cauldron and James Millard.
Yes.
We have them all in attendance. Excellent. Okay, thank you. I just need to explain to the members of the public the protocol for this section of the meeting and how it will follow. Our officers today will be sharing their screens throughout the presentation. Members will also have this presentation form information via hard copies. Committee members, please ensure that you do not leave your screen at any time during the presentation. Public should need to leave for any reason, please give the reason for leaving to the post through the chat, and you will need to understand that you could then be in a situation where you are unable to vote on the application under discussion at the time of your absence. Please be advised if a member should lose connection for a period of time, the meeting will be adjourned until the member reconnects. Before the meeting will resume, if the member is not reconnected in the timescale allowed, he or she will not have a vote on the application under consideration at the time of losing connection. Members can I advise you that on conclusion of the presentation, if necessary, I'll ask through a roll call if you have any questions in relation to the presentation. Could I please request if you should have any further questions or comments after I've asked you in the roll call, would you address those through the chat or through our host, Leah, who will bring it to my attention. We will now proceed to the presentation. Thank you, Officer Burgess.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. Right, I'll just share my screen now.
Morning.
Right. Could someone confirm they've got that, please?
Yeah, yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Great stuff.
Yes,
Thank you.
see it.
Right, so this first application we have today is for land at Green Lane East, Little Plumstead, and it is for the development of up to 130 market and affordable dwellings, a 92-bed extra care independent living facility, and the medical centre, with all matters reserved except access, because this is an outline application. Now, this application is presented at committee today because it's contrary to the provisions of the development plan, and the officer recommendation is to approve the scheme. In addition, the local member, Sean Vincent, has requested that the application be determined by the planning committee as it's outside of the settlement limit. So I'm just going to take you through a few slides so we get an idea of where we are, to give you the background to it, and then I'll talk you through the assessment and why the recommendation is such as it is. So we'll take this first slide, and what we have here is it shows the parish boundary of Great and Little Plumstead, with the site in this area where the large red arrow is pointing to. You'll see that it's sort of right on the edge of the parish, adjacent to the settlement, the village of Rackheath, and we have the railway line, Bittern line, running north to south along here. This just gives it in more local context. Again, we've got the railway line here, but just wanted to show you where it sits in relation to the Broadland Northway. That's the A1270 running along this line here. And then, as always, it's more useful to look at the aerial view, because we already start to see the context of the site next to the adjacent settlement of Rackheath, railway line running down there, moving over to Little Plumstead in the east, and then we have Thorpe End down to the southwest over here, Plumstead Road running along this line. And then just to give you a little bit of context, so members might remember prior to Christmas we had an application in this yellow bounded area just in here that was for 100% affordable housing scheme, and that was approved by the committee. That sits adjacent to the site, and just as I've described before, that is in Rackheath. This, however, is in Plumstead. And then just to be clear, this site sits outside the settlement limit. This is the settlement limit for Rackheath. The settlement limit for Plumstead is further down. And then in terms of the Growth Triangle Area Action Plan, relating to allocations, just to confirm again, this site is not allocated. It's adjacent to sites GT 19, 18 that are allocated, and other allocations in Rackheath. Apologies for changing the orientation now of the plan, but if we go back, you'll see this is the orientation of the site here, and then it sort of turns on its side. So apologies to that, but it's the only way we can get a decent view of it. So that's the north-south railway line and the Bittern line running adjacent to it. This is the proposed access into the site. And what we have here is the proposal in here for the medical centre to the front of the site. In here, we have the extra care facility, and these other areas are the residential properties interspersed with open space. But again, just to be clear, this is an indicative plan and isn't one that necessarily would be how it was finalised. Of relevance as well, and we'll be able to show it in a bit more detail soon, is that there's a footpath running adjacent to the railway line currently that comes all the way from Broad Lane down the railway line underneath the Broadland Northway Bridge and exits onto Plumstead Road. This is just a proposed road hierarchy plan, just to show this is the primary access into the site. And then this was a later plan that was attached as part of the supplementary schedule, and this relates to what I was just talking about. And this is the public footpath that joins onto Plumstead Road, goes underneath the Broadland Northway over that way, and the railway line, sorry, that way. And we have this new area here that's being proposed by the applicant would be a pedestrian cycleway to join this footway that goes back towards the site all the way along to to Thorpe End Village Hall, which then joins on to a Trotter footpath that goes through the village. Photographs will explain that much better, which we move on to now. And this view, just wanted to start to give you an idea, looking northwest towards Rackheath, to give you an idea of the properties that are on the other side of Green Lane East at the moment. This is the site on the opposite side, on the left-hand side of the screen. This tree belt denotes the boundary to the site, and the boundary to the site, as I talked about before, that we've already approved prior to Christmas. And you'll note that the properties here are primarily chalet bungalows. Just gives you that further context of those properties. This is a view looking from over the railway line towards the site. Obviously, it's an agricultural field at the moment, and that's the boundary to the neighbouring site. Again, just some photographs with the Broadland Northway in the distance over there, so looking towards that. And then you'll start to see the bridge that I've talked about before, the Broadland Northway bridge with the railway line going underneath. That's relevant as we move through the slides. The footpath is along this edge of the site. That's the railway fencing. And then this is where we start to join onto it. This photograph is slightly misleading. Just want to explain it was taken some time ago now. The application's been in for a while. It looks as though the level crossing is open to traffic. It isn't. It's only open to pedestrians and cyclists at the moment, not for vehicles. This is the footpath that I talked about along the railway line going underneath the bridge there. That's it in more detail. You see it's a good, solid, sizable footpath that was provided as part of the Broadland Northway improvements. That should give a bit more detailed context looking backwards towards the houses. And then this is where it exits onto Plumstead Road. So what we've got here is that footpath coming out and exits here, as I've just described. So then just to give that wider context of the sort of distance and what's there currently on Plumstead Road, this is looking back across the Plumstead Road level crossing. That is that view following the arrows towards Thorpe End, and you'll see there's no pedestrian footway that connects the two at the moment, and that's what the applicant is proposing to provide. Again, just to give you that wider context of what's there at the moment, i.e. just verge. This is actually the access to Thorpe End Village Hall in here, where it's proposing that the footpath would in effect terminate, well, across the frontage here to where the trod starts through into the village of Thorpe End. That's the village hall on the right hand side there. And so I'll just leave you with that plan while I talk through the assessment of the scheme. So the key considerations are detailed on pages 36 to 51 of the agenda, but I wanted to draw members' attention to the very principle of this application and whether the planning balance tips in favour of approving it, even though it lies outside of the defined settlement limit or allocation. So the main harm, in officer's opinion, to consider is that the site is located outside of the defined settlement limit and the proposals do not accord with a specific policy in the development plan that allows for residential development outside of said settlement limit. So the application is therefore contrary to not only policy 15 of the Joint Coast Strategy, but also policy GC2 of the Development Management DPD, and will result in policy harm in allowing unplanned development in what we all agree, I'm sure, should be a genuinely plan-led system. But in addition, although the proposals are not considered to result in significant harm to the general character and appearance of the area, there will be some harm of encroaching into open countryside, and there is considered to be some conflict with policy 1 of the Great and Little Plumstead Neighbourhood Plan, given that the proposal will erode part of a gap between the settlements of Rackheath and Little Plumstead. Now, as members are aware and will have heard me saying at the last few committees that I've been to, Planning Law Section 38(6) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 requires that applications be determined in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So I suppose the question today really is, why is the recommendation to approve this application? Well, this has come down to considering whether there are significant benefits that outweigh the harm of unplanned housing development. And I'm just going to run through those benefits now. Although outside of the settlement limit, the residential development of up to 130 market and affordable houses will provide some benefit. But given that a 5-year housing supply can be demonstrated, the residential development proposed on the site is considered to be a benefit with little weight, and this on its own is not considered to outweigh the harms identified as I've just have. The provision of the extra care facility is considered a benefit in planning terms as well, and especially considering the demonstrated need for such schemes in the area. This has been expressed in much more detail than I'll go into now in paragraphs 5.15 to 5.20 on pages 40 to 42 of the agenda. But for members' information, Norfolk County Council's Living Well document makes it clear that approaching 3,000 additional extra care units will be required by 2028. So we can attach positive weight to the proposed extra care facility, but again, the benefits on their own would not be sufficient to outweigh the harms I've identified earlier. Now, the medical centre, however, would provide a facility, in officer's opinion, for which significant weight in the planning balance could be given. Now, this is gone through in detail in paragraphs 5.7 to 5.11 on pages 38 to 39 of the agenda, but in summary, there is a clear identified need for GP provision in the area because of housing growth, a historical lack of provision in the area, and a lack of capacity or ability to expand capacity at other local practices. Second point being the delivery of a medical centre will be undertaken by medical centre developments who have a proven track record of success in this field. Thirdly, the Norfolk and Waveney Clinical Commissioning Group, the CCGs, have confirmed that this is their current preferred site for the new medical centre. And then fourthly, the applicants have agreed to delivery triggers for the medical centre, including delivering services to the site prior to the commencement of the housing, a detailed application to be submitted for the medical centre within 12 months of the outline approval of the scheme, and the construction of the medical centre to slab level by the occupation of the 40th dwelling. Now, just taking a couple of other things, moving on to an economic perspective, there would be significant local economic benefits gained from the construction of the development, the significant job creation at the extra care facility, and the significant job creation at the medical centre, and also from the additional household expenditure and council revenue, as well as monies from the community infrastructure levy, and of course, as one of the material considerations is the recovery from the COVID-19. And this, in officer's opinion, weighs in favour of the application. Further to the above, and as I've touched upon in the presentation, the applicants have agreed to provide a continuous footpath cycleway extension along Plumstead Road towards Thorpe End on other land that they own. This will provide a footpath cycleway from the village hall and Thorpe End, as I've said, all the way to the application site, and that ends up connecting with the site and Thorpe End. And this is in line, in officer's opinion, with policy 3 of the Great and Little Plumstead Neighbourhood Plan, which states that all new development should maximise opportunities to walk and cycle between Great Plumstead, Little Plumstead and Thorpe End Garden Village, and also has some resonance with policy 4 of the Neighbourhood Plan, which in part requires development to mitigate the negative impacts of traffic generation. So this has been very carefully considered application, and whilst there is policy harm undoubtedly of unplanned development, it's considered that the significant cumulative benefits highlighted outweigh the policy harms identified. And then therefore, moving on to the recommendation, as per page 51 of the agenda, the committee is recommended to delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Planning to approve this application, subject to the satisfactory completion of a Section 106 agreement relating to the heads of terms highlighted on page 51 of the agenda, further agreement of terms in relation to triggers for the delivery of the extra care housing, and subject to appropriate conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for the officer in relation to the presentation, please? No? Okay, that's lovely. Thank you. Oh, apologies, Councillor.
Yeah, it's okay, Chair. The medical centre, obviously, it appears that it's demonstrated that one is needed in the area. Why does it have to be on this site and not in the growth triangle?
Yeah, it's a very good and very fair question. It's the opportunity, I think, is what we're looking at. The sites, the larger site in Rackheath, the GT16 site, that's sort of a size that we would expect and have planned for there to be a GP facility within that. That would make a lot of sense within the local centre. That site has been allocated for a number of years now and hasn't yet come forward. And then the residents of the local area haven't had a facility, a GP facility for many years. So it's the opportunity, I suppose, as I said at the start. Either we take this now and look at it, which obviously could have benefits, or we wait for the larger scheme to come forward, which could be another number of years, certainly until we get to the local centre. And then also, I suppose, to add to it, just because there would be one here potentially if it were to be approved, wouldn't mean that there wouldn't be another one required, given the large scale of growth that we're looking to do in the local area.
Okay, Councillor Beadle. Thank you.
I don't know if it's
Councillor
okay or
Riley?
not, but
Oh, sorry, Councillor Beadle.
I acknowledge the answer.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just to clarify, excuse me, the basis in terms of this coming before us for consideration. I'm aware of previously when there's been applications outside the settlement limit that the officer may have had a recommendation for material reasons, as Ben said, you know, it does happen, material reasons, believing that it outweighs. But I've always seen in previously that the officers have still brought it to the committee because it is outside the settlement limit for the committee to decide, even though there's a recommendation to accept. So on this occasion, Councillor Vincent has had to call this in. So I'm just wondering why that is. If you could just clarify that, please.
Yeah, apologies. Suppose if I wasn't clear at the start. It's here on both bases.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Any further members? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, this time we will now open our meeting to public speakers, and we will proceed with the representation from the Parish Council of Thorpe End, Mr. Andrew Cauldron. Officer Atherton, could you please unmute Mr. Cauldron? Okay, are we there? Hello. Thank you, Mr. Cauldron.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us this morning, and we do appreciate that you're taking the time to be with us. I just have to advise you that you will have 5 to the committee. Unfortunately, we don't have a clock that we can show on the screen to show you the time, but our host will advise you when you have 1 minute remaining. Is that acceptable to you?
Yes, that's fine, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much. I assume you can hear me?
Thank you. If you could please introduce yourself, and you will have 5. Yes, I can hear you. And I'm really sorry, my internet connection isn't very good, so if I keep breaking up, I do apologise. But if you could please introduce yourself, and you will have 5 minutes starting from now.
Hello, good morning, everybody, and thank you for your time and attention. My name's Andrew Cauldron, and I'm one of the parish councillors from Great and Little Plumstead Parish Council, and I've been asked to speak against this particular proposal. I just want to say we're rather disappointed to see it come back with a recommendation, primarily because it's contrary to the policies of Broadland District Council. We have made representations in writing, which you've seen within the agenda papers. The site is simply not required for housing, is outside the development area, is not affecting any 5-year land supply, and is yet a further loss of the village separations being increasingly filled in and coalesced. We also consider it shifts the balance of Rackheath away from its centre, and together with the GT site next door, places nearly 400 dwellings into this area, all discharging via the Soul and Heel roundabout. It also means the medical centre, which we certainly don't object to as a future provision, but it is proposed at one end of the extended village and drags it away from public transport, and it will therefore need vehicle access and, you know, considerable parking. In terms of the cycle connections, nobody's going to risk the NDR roundabouts, so the improvements to the Plumstead Road are certainly a welcome aspect of the proposal. Pedestrian access is, however, disadvantaged because if you do need to cross the road, the Plumstead Road and the Salhouse Road are both at very difficult junctions at the Soul and Heel and at Reeves Corner. And environmentally, it's placing people in harm's way next to the NDR with air and noise pollution dangers. Although until such time as damages start to be awarded against local authorities, these health risks will continue to be ignored. If I can just point out 3 technical points. There's no longer a post office in Thorpe End as shown on the travel plan. A 4.8 secondary road is a disaster waiting to happen, because as soon as a car is parked, nothing else can get past. And we also keep pleading with Broadland District Council and Anglian Water Authority that SUD's sustainable drainage systems are a real danger in the area. They do not work. You can see from the photographs that have already been showed by Mr. Burgess that there's already excess water there, and Reeves Corner is known for flooding anyway. So finally, our biggest reservation about this proposal is this is yet a further break with established policies and development areas. It's out of location, and we consider that an out of place medical centre is an insufficient reason to break those policies. Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman and the committee and officers.
Thank you very much. Members, can I ask if you have any questions for Mr. Cauldron? No, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's really appreciated. We shall move on to our next speaker for this application, and we have James Millard. Officer Atherton, please unmute Mr. Millard.
Good morning.
Okay, thank you for joining us, Mr. Millard, this morning. As you've just heard that we don't have a clock that we can show you. Are you happy that the host will advise you when you have 1 minute of your 5 minutes remaining?
I am, that's fine.
Okay, lovely. If you could please introduce yourself to the committee, and you will have 5 minutes starting from now.
James Millard from Halsbury Homes. Good morning, Chairperson and members. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak in support of this application. We are pleased to see this application reach committee with a positive recommendation for approval after 18 months of constructive discussion with Broadland Council and our development partners, Medical Centre Developments and Saffron Housing Trust. The scheme before you provides a compelling package of extensive community benefits in the form of a medical centre, a 92-bed extra care scheme, 36 affordable homes and high-quality market housing. Following a request from Councillor Vincent last week to provide a footpath and cycleway connection from the village hall at Thorpe End to the site, I can confirm that we are pleased to commit to the delivery of this improvement, as we think it's an entirely sensible and important aspect of this proposal, and we thank Councillor Vincent for this input, as we believe this provides the local residents with further significant benefits provided by this scheme. In closing, I would like to reiterate that Halsbury Homes, along with our development partners, Medical Centre Developments and Saffron Housing Trust, are committed to delivering this scheme and look forward to continuing to work proactively with Broadland Council on its delivery, as we have done so for the past 18 months. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Millard? No, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's very much appreciated. We'll now move on to our third speaker this morning, and it's Councillor Fran Weimark. Thank you, Fran. You'll be aware that you will have 5 minutes to address the committee. The host will advise you when you have 1 minute remaining. Is that acceptable to you?
That's absolutely acceptable.
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. Thank you. If you could please introduce yourself, and you have 5 minutes starting from now.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Fran Weimark, Councillor Fran Weimark. I am a District Councillor on Broadland District Council. I'm also a Norfolk County Councillor for the Wroxham Division, and I'm also on Rackheath Parish Council. I'll be very clear, I'm not speaking on behalf of Rackheath Parish Council today. More importantly, I'm a resident. I'm a resident of Rackheath and have been so for over 20 years. I'd like to thank the Chairman for allowing me to speak today, as I did ask at late notice. The reason I asked to speak today was because of a chance meeting, really, particularly at this moment in time, because we don't meet too many people, of a friend in the village, someone who lives, well, you'd have seen a picture of his house actually in the presentation, who spoke about the medical centre and how that would be helpful for himself and his family, and perhaps even the extra care in the long term. I have worked for the parish, I believe, for the last 10 years to advocate for infrastructure before development. And to be clear, if this was only a development of housing, I would be objecting to it. However, I believe with the addition of the medical centre and the extra care living, then I think this is a development we should be supporting. Over the last 3 to 4 years, I've spoken to 3 potential providers of the medical centre. This is the first viable one to come forward. GT16, yeah, GT16 is going to be a major development for the village. On that development, yes, we probably will need more medical facility, and I'm sure we will do too. However, we have a good opportunity here to have a medical centre which will provide services for Rackheath and for the Plumstead and maybe beyond there. One of the things in the report here, actually 4.24, it's the last paragraph at the bottom of page 33 running into 34. It refers to the Hovton and Wroxham Medical Centre providing a satellite surgery here in Rackheath. That's not been the case for many years, many years. If you live in Rackheath and you want to access a surgery, you need to go to Thorpewood Surgery, which is not on a bus route, which is on the edges of Norwich, or you have to go to Hovton, and there's one bus an hour to get there. So if it's not at the right time, then that's not good for you, or you have to drive. So actually there's no provision really easily accessible from Rackheath as it is. And with the growth that we have already, Mr. Cauldron actually referred to the fact that 157 houses are going in right next door to this site. And there are many more if we look down the Salhouse Road, which will impact upon Salhouse and somewhat, well, not Salhouse Road, should I say, but impact upon Rackheath. And some of that is actually in Rackheath parish itself. So I think this provides us with a good opportunity to go forward and get the medical centre that we need locally, and as I say, the extra care living as well. I have had meetings with medical centres developments, with Saffron Housing, Hallsbury, the CCG, and over the years, many other developers too, and I'll continue to do so because I want the best for Rackheath. I know this isn't in Rackheath, but it directly impacts upon Rackheath, which is why I'm speaking today. If you look at Rackheath neighbourhood plan, actually on page 54 under service projects, it says about primary health care, and I'll read it to you. It says, work with the clinical commissioning group and deliverers of primary health care to consider provision of sufficient health care to meet the needs of Rackheath. Thank you. I believe this does do that, exactly that. As I say, I've been asking, and I was on the original master plan for GT16 over 10 years ago. It's not been provided over those years. It doesn't look at this moment in time as it will be provided anytime soon. Therefore, any medical centre that could be on that site could be way off in the distance. I'll just finish by saying my argument has always been for infrastructure for local communities. It will continue to be so. I think this application gives that opportunity for the infrastructure that we are arguing for. I'll finish there. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for Councillor Weimark?
Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Leggett.
Could I ask Mr. Weimark, do you share Mr. Cauldron's concern about the potential flooding at Reeves Corner?
There are concerns around flooding, particularly, well, Reeves Corner, there are issues down there, but even more so at the roundabout on the Salhouse Road. That is something I'm working with Highways on with my County Council hat on, and we have literally just flushed it out and cleaned out the drains. But there are improvements that are needed there. Reeves Corner is a concern. The road is closed off at Broad Lane onto Plumstead Road to stop rat running through there. That happened when we got the NDR built. But yeah, there are concerns along the local area around flooding. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Weimark.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions from any of the members? Nope. Thank you very much for your time this morning. It's very much appreciated. We'll move on to our final speaker this morning, and we have Councillor Vincent. And Councillor Vincent, can I just confirm with you that you're happy that the host will advise you when you have 1 minute of your 5 minutes remaining?
I'm happy with that. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. If you could please just introduce yourself for members of the public, and you have 5
Thank you,
minutes
Chairman.
starting from now.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Sean Vincent. I am the Broadland District Councillor for the Plumstead Ward, which this application sits in. I've called in the application, and as has been stated, my reason for doing so in section 4.4 is it sits outside the settlement limit. So why is this so important? As a planning authority, we spend a great deal of time, energy in identifying and allocating where development should go. You heard the officer say it, a plan-led approach, which gives us a joined up for where development should go. Being outside the development boundary, you'd expect this application to be on an allocated site because of its size. It's not. It's not in the core strategy. It's not in the growth triangle area action plan. You all know the new local plan is currently out for consultation. This site has not been put forward by us as a local authority, as the planning authority, as a site we would want to see development on. This is a predatory application. Looking at the housing need, again, you heard the officer say there is no need for additional housing. The new local plan identifies the housing we need and the sites for it up to 2038. More importantly, the core strategy and the new local plan also identifies the best places for those new homes to go. So we heard the main reason why this has been put forward and supported is to do with the medical centre. And the proposals in the application are welcome in that it does have a medical centre. Sadly, this support is misplaced. This proposed medical centre is just in the wrong place. It's outside of the existing villages of Rackheath and Thorpe End Garden Village. It's nowhere near Little Plumstead and it's nowhere near Great Plumstead. It's at the end of a dead-end road. The correct place for this medical centre is at the heart of the new development, as identified in the core strategy and the up-and-coming local plan under policy GT16 is the right place around the allocation where the additional 3,500 new homes are going. Under GT16 within the policy, it does state a health and social care facility is required as part of the policy requirements. So it should sit in GT16. Just to give you some context for Thorpe End Garden Village, at this point in time, there are around 3,000 new homes allocated around that area in GT6, GT7, GT11 and GT22. That's without the ones that actually fall in Rackheath. So it's an area of substantial growth, and it seems very unfair that we're putting yet more homes into an already saturated area. So we heard that the key benefit was this medical centre, and I would say to you that the key place for that medical centre is where it should be in GT16, at the heart of Rackheath, at the heart of the new development, at the heart of what will be the new village of Rackheath. I would just like to thank Mr. Millard and Halsbury Homes for the inclusion of the footpath. That's a welcomed addition, and should you feel that you support this application, then that will definitely benefit residents of Thorpe End Garden Village. So to summarise, I do not support this proposal. There is no housing requirement.
1 minute remaining.
We have a housing supply far in excess of the 5-year requirement. The extra care beds, again, as the officer explained to us, are not sufficient benefit to warrant this application being approved. And the medical centre is already catered for. It's a requirement under GT16. That's where it should go. It shouldn't be stuck out on the edge of the village here. Thank you. I'll leave it for you to determine whether you support this application or not. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vincent. Members, do you have any questions for Councillor Vincent? No? Okay, thank you for your time this morning. It's very much appreciated. Okay, that brings our public speaking to a close. Members, we will now go into discussion in relation to this application. Apologies if I keep cutting out. I don't know what's happening to my internet system at the moment. We will remain unmuted as a committee. Please, can I ask if you'd like to comment or ask a question of the officers, please register your request to do so in the chat, and I will come to you in turn. After this discussion, the committee will then determine the decision of the application on the proposal and seconding for the application. If necessary during the discussion, Officer Mellors and Officer Burgess will be able to respond to your questions accordingly. Members, after appropriate discussion, I will roll call if necessary to agree to have your agreement. There's no further comments before we should go to the vote. And if I can have a show of hands of anybody who wants to speak or put discussion. And you have to forgive me, my internet is really slow. Councillor Karimi Govan-Liu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just a bit concerned about the access to this site. Can someone tell me, is there a bus route that goes down there?
Certainly, if it's okay to respond, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's not a bus route that goes down the actual road down Green Lane East because it terminates at the railway line. But there is a bus stop approximately 500 metres away on Salhouse Road outside the Soul and Heel pub. It's the 5B bus that goes from there, and it does go through Thorpe End.
So we're going to have a lot of traffic going down there to the care home and the medical centre. I'm just thinking about accessibility for people who don't have cars to go to the medical centre.
Yes, certainly. So as part of the scheme, I think probably first of all, there are two access points into that part of Green Lane East. There is, of course, the Longit that goes to the Soul and Heel pub roundabout, and then there is via Vera Road that ultimately comes out onto Salhouse Road a bit further north. In terms of walking and cycling, the other means primarily to get to it, of course, there will be the pedestrian cycle link all the way from Thorpe End, but also as part of the application, sorry, I should have referred to this earlier, there will be upgrades to the footpath. In effect, a footpath will be created all the way back from the site along to the, in effect, to the bus stop where the footpath starts. So there will be the opportunity to do that. And then through the two neighbouring sites, footpaths are being proposed through them as well across the frontage. So there will be opportunities to access that via all modes of transport.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher.
Unmuted. Okay, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is very balanced argument, I think. I would just like to ask Mr. Burgess, from a sustainability point of view and access of residents, effectively the medical centre is going to serve Rackheath, and for the look of it, and I do know the area fairly well because in I was delivering prescriptions around that area from the pharmacies in Thorpe, which is interestingly, and identifies probably the need for a medical centre to be there. But is that, in your opinion, is it walkable to the settlement at Rackheath?
So is the site walkable to the main centre of Rackheath? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, I would say yes. The distance to that bus stop to the Soul and Heel pub that I talked about is around about 500 metres. Beyond that, the church is around about 500 to 600 metres away, and then the school is around about 700 metres away if you take the footpath adjacent to the church. And then locally, sorry, do you mind if I put the screen up, because it's probably easier than me?
No, that's fine, go ahead.
Yeah, that would make sense, wouldn't it, really? So which one should we put up? Let's do this one again. There we go. So we've got the site in here, and as I talked about before, along the frontage to the bus stop is there. It's around about 500 metres away. To the church, which is in here, I say between about 500 and 600 metres, and then to the school, probably actually more like 800 metres away. There's a footpath that just joins onto the back of the school into the play area. In this sort of area here, there is a shop in there along Vera Road, and then the main shops with that there are hairdressers and other news agents are in this area in Rackheath. So it depends how you view the village, really. Obviously, that's the main settlement at the moment. We've approved the scheme within here, and there is an allocated and actually now approved scheme within here as well. So the village is expanding down to the southwest. at the moment. So yes, in my officer's opinion, then yes, it would be.
So it would also then therefore be quite accessible for electric buggies from the care home.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll have Councillor Beadle, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't know Rackheath particularly well, but I know it a little bit. And I would say this development that actually does skew the centre of the village quite dramatically, or would do. I would regard this position for the doctor's surgeries at the medical centre as not the correct place for it. And you know, we do have plans for the whole of the district for various services, and they're thought out in the abstract, and we don't take into account things which come as a whim, shall we say. Not I'm suggesting this is a whim because it's quite a serious proposal. I think that the medical centre will be far more appropriate in the growth triangle. It's an allocation for it in the growth triangle, and we shouldn't be encouraging this proposal to set up in competition or even scupper that site. And so I think on the various policy grounds which have already been stated, we should grant this application. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Beadle, was that a proposal?
You're
just thinking,
I'm quite happy to make a proposal on policy grounds GT16.
Is that for or against?
Against this proposal.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will then move on to Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Chair. Could I address a question to Ben Burgess? Mr. Cauldron was very concerned about the flooding, and I think you may have answered it in the report, but could you just comment on that? And would you also just help me on his concern about the very narrowness of the road? I drove to the site very recently, and I can see his very clear point that he makes over the narrowness of that road. Have you any comments on that, please?
Yes, certainly, Councillor. So the report does address the potential for flooding, but I suppose I should say the surface water drainage proposal.
Yeah.
On page 28, 4.19, we have the lead local flood authority have replied back to us. And in effect, what they say is the applicant has proposed various soakaways as part of the scheme, and they finish with saying that they've got no objections to the approved scheme. So from our perspective, that's sufficient and acceptable. I think I've probably said this before, but I'll say it again. Often when new development comes along, it can in a sort of slightly perverse way sort out issues of flooding, because it puts in appropriate drainage features like tanks, it puts in ponds, and it collects them in the appropriate places rather than just letting them run off from fields into places like Reeves Corner. But from the officer perspective, we were comforted with the lead local flood authority response. So again, I'd be comfortable with that. And then in terms of the road, I suppose it's been looked at by the Highways Authority. There has been a need identified to improve or to add a footpath, not only along the frontage of the site, but in terms of the footpath back to the main village along it on the northern side. The applicants are going to do that, and then the Highways Authority have accepted that this scheme is fine in their consideration. So again, from an officer perspective, I'm comfortable that there is an appropriate highway solution that can be delivered, that from a highway safety perspective, there won't be an issue.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ward?
Yes, my question was also about flooding. I know the Environment Agency says the the majority of the site is at a very low risk of flooding, but there are 2 small areas within the site identified as high risk of flooding. We saw from the photograph there was a large pond of water which looked to be in the middle of the site. I don't know if that was the middle of the site, but from the plan, the middle of the site is where a lot of the housing is going. And if we're just relying on a few soakaways in people's back gardens, you know, I'm not an expert, but it doesn't seem an awful lot of ways to deal with all that water. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. If I respond to that, yeah. So, maybe just to be clear, what they're looking to do, these soakaways wouldn't be within the residential properties as such. They would be, I'm sure, it would be primarily larger areas in public open space areas that would deal with that. As is often the norm in lots of these sites. In fact, the site next to it, that was the proposal in the corner adjacent to this site almost. That photograph that I showed before, it was very difficult actually when the photographs were being taken to find anywhere that didn't have some level of flooding on given the weather conditions. But actually compared to some other sites, that is reasonably minimal. It's not quite in the middle of the site. It's more towards the entrance of the site, in which the applicants have proposed an area of open space where I would be expecting there to be a soakaway of some sort or some drainage feature within there. So again, it's actually almost backing up the fact that they've proposed the open space there, the fact that there would be sustainable drainage in there by that photograph in some ways.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we move to Councillor Adams. Councillor O'Reilly, I've got you coming next. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I do support refusal. I've just been doing a quick calculation here because when you say something like, oh, it's 500 metres, doesn't sound an awful lot, really, does it? I'm a more a feet and inches man myself. And I think if I'm right, that 1 metre is equivalent to about 2.2 feet. Am I right there, Ben? So if you multiply that by the metre, you get about roughly about 1,500 metres there or thereabouts, 1,600 metres. But if you divide that down to yards, of course you're looking at something like 530 yards, which when you consider it takes 1760 yards to a mile, you're looking at about a third of a mile, which to me completely puts a different complexion on it, because a third of a mile is quite a good distance, especially if you are not very good on your pins. And of course, 800 metres was mentioned, which again, you're looking at 2,400 feet there or thereabouts. If you divide that by 3, that gives you 800 yards, which is about half a mile. And again, I don't consider that really sensibly to be within walking distance if you have got any kind of disability regarding your mobility. Also, I believe the officers have summed it up very well on page 37 in terms of refusal, when it quite clearly lays out that in fact this is completely contrary to our DPD and completely contrary probably to the MPPF. But I would rely on what the officers are saying in terms of 5.4 and 5.5, and because at the end of the day, the policy 10 of the JCS identifies where major growth will go, doesn't include Little Plumstead. So yes, Rackheath would get the benefit, but Little Plumstead would suffer the consequences. And also the GC2, again, it quite clearly states in the officer's own comments that the proposals do not accord with the specific policy in the development plan that allows for development outside of the settlement limit. So why are they proposing this one, I wonder? We're able to demonstrate a 5-year plan, and therefore, Chairman, I move that this be refused on the grounds given by the officers themselves in 5.5 and 5.4 and 5.5 of their own summation. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Sorry, are you seconding, Councillor?
Yeah, I'll second Stuart. Unusually,
okay,
but I will on this occasion.
Okay, And just before we go on, can I just ask Officer Burgess, can you just tell me in how many miles is it to the nearest GP or medical centre from where this application is currently?
That's a very good question. I don't think I know the answer to that.
Sorry, I assumed that you'd have.
No, sorry. The closest medical centre I can think, or the one that used to have
Side and Wroxham.
Sorry?
Is it Side and Wroxham?
The Houghton and Wroxham practice,
Yeah.
which is just over into Houghton. That was the one that used to provide the facility, and I imagine the number of residents of Rackheath go to at the moment. I can, if you want to have another question, I can just have a quick look at how far that would be. I'd imagine it would be 3-4 miles. I mean, Councillor Weimark might actually be able to answer that question.
But if you wouldn't mind just looking,
Yeah,
please, while we're still in discussion.
I'll do that now.
For the one at Thorpe and the one at Wroxham. Okay, Councillor Riley.
Councillor Riley, sorry, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, the comments that have been made by, I think, every speaker, including Fran Weimark, are all relevant, actually. And I think also the comments that Fran made in terms of infrastructure needing to support development, but also, of course, planned development around infrastructure goes both ways. And I think when you come back on to what Sean Vincent said, and also the speaker for the parish, it's really obvious, I think, on this particular application that is actually not what is occurring. We have villages, substantial villages, 500, 600 more, that are 3 to 4 miles away all over Broadland. So clearly we have what we have. However, we have a plan here under the growth triangle and the reference G216 that Sean made as well, which is entirely relevant material to this application. I think this is a predatory application. I think when we're talking about the policy of settlement limits, it's there for a reason. And we're not talking about subdivision of a plot here, or whether it's very close. We're actually talking about a major development, which is really what that all concerns. And it's in the wrong place. It is already covered in terms of where the medical facility should be in terms of infrastructure, and it simply isn't here. But what I'm seeing on this particular application is the medical centre is being used as a means, as a predatory application to get around the settlement limit. That's really effectively as I'm reading this. It's not required. It's already covered somewhere else. It should be happening somewhere else. So therefore, I would third the opposition to the recommendation, Chair, if that's entirely possible.
Not at the moment. Okay, thank you. Councillor Karimi Gubanlu.
I was just concerned with the medical centre. That's going to benefit Rackheath more than it is at Little Plumstead. And if one is built there, is there going to, being devil's advocate, excuses not to build one on the GT16 site?
I can answer that, and then I can answer your question as well, Councillor Lawn.
Okay, thank you.
So look, I suppose we can't predict the future, but what we do know is that there's been an identified need from the document that the CCG have produced, and it is within this area, and it is on the basis that there is significant growth, but also that growth that was planned in the Growth Triangle Area Action Plan has increased as well. It was 10,000 homes. It's now up to 13,500 homes, just by the very nature of how developments and how plans have taken place and how they've continued along. So just because there is one being proposed here, and if it were to be approved, it be built here, doesn't mean that there wouldn't be one in the main centre. You know, I think we all know of sites or locations where there's more than one medical practice close to the other one, and due to the very nature of the developments happening in the area, again, I'm not at all saying this will definitely happen because I can't predict the future, but I would be very surprised if there wasn't another need for a medical practice within the GT16 site that comes forward. Again, we're here today, I suppose, because this is an opportunity that's arisen. That's the word I've used before. It's the word I'll use again. And I think I suppose to or it wasn't necessarily a question that was posed to me, but I suppose what's come up in the discussion is that this is a scheme that, yes, of course, is outside the settlement limit, and we as officers have only proposed it because of those overriding benefits, and those overriding benefits I've identified. It's not just the medical centre, but it's the extra care, it's the connections, it's the housing to an extent, and it's the footpath back to Plumstead and Thorpe End that doesn't exist either. So we've kind of gone on a package of it, and I know that the reports had to be balanced, which is the right thing to do, and it is a very difficult balance in this instance. But just wanted to express again, that's why we've come forward with the proposal for the approval. And then just to answer your questions, Councillor Lawn, the Houghton and Roxton practice is 5 miles away, and the Limewood surgery is around about 4 miles away.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Fisher? I'm so you can't speak. Councillor Fisher, are you muted?
I'm muted.
You're still muted.
Okay. Thank you. No, Ben just answered my question. My estimate was the Thorpe surgery was about 4 mile away, which of course is a lot different to the third of a mile that Tony Adams referred to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ward?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make the point that with the care home next door to the medical centre, the care homes do generate a lot of traffic for a medical centre. So I think there's going to be plenty of demand for more than one medical centre in this area. You know, just go back to Thorpe. There's 4 or 5 medical centres within about 2 miles, actually. Yes.
Okay. Okay, and if I could just put my 2 pennies worth in, please. I think this site is acceptable. I think that it's. I don't see if this G16 comes on that there would be too many GP surgeries. We sit here week after week, year after year, saying that we need to have infrastructure in place, and we need to have medical and school infrastructure. We have got the opportunity. The only reason why this application is in front of us, and the reason why the officers are saying that it's for recommendation, is because it's got the GP surgery in there. We know that, and as much as you can sit and say, you know, it goes against all the principles, you know, it's going to be Rackheath who will benefit as opposed to Little Plumstead or Thorpe End. We're talking about people here. We're not. It's okay. The border for how this section was set out isn't really practical. Why did we have that little cut in so that this site then comes under Little Plumstead as opposed to come under Rackheath? Goodness knows, somebody drew that up, but that's how it is. We can't say this site will be in isolation. It's not in isolation. It is outside of the development, the site allocation. I totally accept that, but I don't think it will be a site that will be in isolation. I think with the trod or the pathway that's coming along from this site to Thorpe End, it is giving everybody ample opportunity to move about quite easily. You can walk, you can drive, you can walk. So there is the possibility to come into both Rackheath, Thorpe End, and then further into Thorpe St Andrew. So I feel that the benefits of this scheme certainly outweigh the harm. The development will bring the facility of a very much needed medical centre. I could not sit here with all our principles, with all the policies that we have in place, and say that I will not accept this application, saying that we're turning down a GP surgery. We desperately need those at this moment in time, and whichever way that is being brought forward to us, it is a GP surgery. We need to have the Living Well sites. We've got those. We've got the additional housing. You're never going to find a GP surgery being built on a site on its own. Somebody has to pay for that. We've got Saffron Housing who are saying that they will fund the Living Well. We've got the medical division who will be overseeing the GP surgery. G16 has been sitting there for years. It could sit there for quite a few years longer. The people in Rackheath need a GP surgery, and I could not for one turn around and say I'm not accepting this application. So if anybody's got anything else they need to say, then we can go with it, or else we can go to the vote. Okay, Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, just a slightly different tack. Looking at 1.8 on page 12, it makes reference to on-site informal public open space. But unless I've missed it, having read all through this, there's no provision of play equipment. And we're talking about affordable homes, so we're going to have young families. Is this yet another one where it's going to be said, oh, well, there's a playground in Rackheath, so children and parents have to traipse all the way to that particular location? So is there going to be any on-site play equipment provided? Perhaps Ben can help us with that.
Yes, certainly, Councillor. So there's a proposed, the requirement is that the 106 would need to have provision for play, and that play, as always, could be on-site or off-site or a contribution towards it. Now, if the message that we're getting back is that it should be on-site, well, there are spaces within the development that could accommodate play, so we could certainly look to do that. I can't today say that yes, it will definitely be on site, because again, a discussion with the parish councils might be appropriate in this instance to see what they considered to be the right place to have it, but certainly there would be the space for the play and the requirement to have it.
Okay.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we've got two issues here. I think mainly what the material consideration is, and the other issue is national policy on the basis that we know there's been sites identified for development. Fran took over my place on the Rackheath Growth Board 10 years ago. So it's absolutely amazing that we've been waiting for 10 years for a doctor's surgery and a development to come forward, because we are dependent on big developers developing out. So that's why we are presented with this issue today. What we're faced with is potentially a medical centre which we have been identified both by the local member who lives in the ward and has spoken to local residents and identifies that as a need. We've identified the fact that it's in a sustainable development. It is needed, as I was delivering prescriptions, but I now find to be 4 miles away from the closest medical centre. I really can't see how we can not support this application for those very reasons. We've got the added footpath and the cycleway added to this. I think the fact that anyone should be thinking of turning this down because of distance. This is close. This is close to a settlement. This is what we need. And as you identified, Chairman, every other planning application we have, we get comments from the local residents saying, we want a medical centre. We are short of medical centres. This is providing this particular, after 10 years plus of waiting. So I'm very happy to second your proposal that as per the conditions laid out on page 51 by the report. Thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, Councillor Fisher, we have got a proposer and seconder to refuse this application. So we need to deal with that first. Councillor Officer Mellors, can you just advise that you're aware of the reasons why this is and the policies for this being refused?
Yes, I think there has been careful discussion on what it is contrary to. Councillor Adams obviously referred to it being outside the development limit, is also contrary to the neighbourhood plan. And what has also been said is that they consider that the location of the medical centre is not in the right location to serve the planned growth, and made reference to the allocated site for where the medical centre was planned to go in GT16. That would be enough not to give significant, overturning what the officers have put forward as significant weight to giving consent outside the development limit. So that would be the contrary argument that I've heard put forward. And also there's been reference to lack of public transport links down to the site and it being a cul-de-sac. So I think all those would be the reasons that those members who have put that proposal to refuse would be acceptable.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think that if anyone else has got anything, Leah, has anybody, if I missed anybody off the list? Okay, if we have no further comments, I can ask that we will now move to the vote. And if I can advise, it has been proposed by Councillor Beadle and seconded by Councillor Adams that we as a committee should refuse the officer's recommendation to delegate authorities to the Assistant Director of Planning to approve this application subject to satisfactory completion of Section 106. And then it continues with the conditions as set out in 51 and 52. So we are voting for you to say that you're happy to refuse this application. And we can go to the vote, Officer Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. So if members could indicate if they are for or against refusal. So Councillor Adams.
Or
Councillor Beadle.
or refusal.
Councillor Fisher.
Against.
Councillor Folger.
Against.
Councillor Creamy Govan-Lou.
I'm going to vote. I'm really split on this. I'm going to vote against.
Councillor Lawn.
Against.
Councillor Leggett.
Sure, I too am going to. Yes. I'm actually for it at the moment.
So you're for refuse. Sorry, can I just confirm, Councillor Leggett, is that for refusal or for the application?
No, for refusal.
So you're voting for refusal. Thank you. Councillor Prutton.
It is a difficult one, but I will vote against.
Councillor Riley.
For, Chair.
And Councillor Ward.
Against.
Dawn, you've missed me out.
Oh, I do apologise, Mr. Brennan.
That's all right.
so sorry.
That's all right, Dawn. Thank you. Against.
Thank you. I do apologise.
That's all right, Dawn.
2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, the members there are, the result of that is there are 7 members voting for the proposal, which is for refusal, and 4 members voting for and 7 members against. So that recommendation is lost.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fisher, did you want to propose as you were going to second mine? Would you like to propose, or I'm sorry, I've lost it.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to propose that we accept the recommendations on page 50.
I'll second it, Chairman.
So
okay, thank you. I'm really sorry, folks, if you can't hear me. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So it has now been proposed by Councillor Fisher, seconded by Councillor Ward, that we as a committee should agree to the officer's recommendation to delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Planning to approve this application subject to the satisfactory completion of a Section 106 agreement relating to the following heads of terms on page 51, further agreement of terms in relation to triggers for the delivery of the extra care housing and subject to conditions as set out on pages 51 and 52 of your papers. Officer Matthews, can you please go to the vote? This time we will be voting for the officer's recommendation to agree.
Thank you, Chairman. So we're voting for or against the proposal to approve. Councillor Adams.
Against.
Councillor Beadle.
Abstain.
Councillor Brennan.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Folger.
For.
Councillor Karimi Govan-Lou.
For.
Councillor Lawn.
For.
Councillor Leggett.
Against.
And Councillor Prutton.
For.
Councillor Riley.
Against.
And Councillor Ward.
For.
Thank you.
2,
3. Abstain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 7. So it's, Chairman, there's 7 members voting for, 3 against and 1 abstention. So that motion, the proposal is carried.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you to our public speakers morning for your time. It's very much appreciated. And members, we will now move on to our second application. And our second application is application number 2020-0640, Land at Manor Park, Drayton. And Leah, could you please confirm that we have with us Mr. Graham Everett, Mr. David Jones, Mr. Jonathan Lieberman, and Mr. Jeff Armstrong?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. And this time it'll be Officer Rook who will be doing the presentation, and I will now hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Yep, good morning, everybody. Thanks for attending. Item number 2, Land at Manor Park, Drayton. If I just share my screen. Everybody see that okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. So this is a full application for 267 dwellings, associated vehicular access, landscaping, open space, car parking and pedestrian links. This is a sort of contextual drawing, the best I could do it with straight lines, because the actual application site's got a lot of curves in it and things like that, but we use this as a basis to start the presentation. The outlined yellow area is the main application site, identified to the sort of western boundary of Drayton. This is the main sort of village centre of Drayton. This area here with the bank, the dentist, pharmacy, 2 pub restaurants in this location, supermarket here. And then getting closer to the site itself on Manor Farm Close, we have the doctor's surgery, which immediately adjoins the boundary to the site. And then further up School Road, we have the junior school and the infant school. So you can see the proximity of the application site to some of those local amenities and facilities. The other thing I wanted to draw members' attention to, and is referred to in the report, is an area here, which is on the sort of the Carter Road. This is Carter Road here, which links between Drayton High Road and Hall Lane, and then George Drive here. This area has been identified under previous applications and under this application as well as an area for traffic calming. There's a concern locally, given that there's an southern access into the development about this point here, that vehicles from the Norwich direction to the application site, rather than coming down into the village at the traffic lights, then turning and coming back through that direction, may be tempted to cut through Carter Road and join the site that way. So there's a proposal as part of this application to traffic calm that area, and I'll refer to that once I get through to the assessment of the application. But just wanted to make members aware, and obviously the context of the site is then agricultural fields. Also, as part of the proposals, there's a proposal to run a footpath along this side of School Road here, connecting to the Reefham Road, running all the way along Reefham Road to the roundabout, new roundabout that's gone in with the junction with Drayton Lane, which then allows pedestrian access along this way and further out towards Horsford, and also on an existing pathway over a green bridge over the Broadland Northway into that way and further onto other pathways connecting to Drayton Drury. In addition, another path is to be created across the fields here alongside an existing well-established tree belt, and that will also connect to Reefham Road. So there's a network of footpaths and proposals that form part of this application as well. Show you this slide first, which is the site allocations DPD from 2016, which identifies the site has been allocated under policy DRA1 of the site allocations DPD. That allocation at the time was was identified for 200 houses. The current application does just extend that a little bit. You can see it gets sort of cuts in at that point there. The actual proposal under the current application is to continue that and extend that into these areas here. So it does run slightly beyond the DRA1 existing allocation, but the predominant part of the site is allocated for housing under your site allocations DPD. This then is the submitted red line of the application site. So you can see what I was meaning about some of this, the curves and the areas around the site. These curves are primarily infiltration basins. I've got a site layout plan I'll show you in a moment, but this brings into context the elements I'm talking about, the pathways running up to Reefham Road to the north of the site, and a pathway that runs into Manor Farm Close at this point here and connects to Vaudrey Road. The intention with that is to provide pedestrian access or enhance pedestrian access to the junior school, which is just about there. This is the overall site layout. I've broken this down, as you'll see through the plans, into more specific areas so we can see the details of the proposal. But you can see the overall layout of the site here with point of vehicular access at Hall Lane here, and another point of vehicular access at School Road at the north of the site at that point. Infiltration, drainage basins along the eastern boundary of the site in this position here, which extends, and another area here. Reason for that is because currently this area, the agricultural fields, are at a slightly higher level than the application site, and historically the runoff from those fields has come across the application site, so it's intended to try and capture some of that before it enters the site. There are a number of other smaller infiltration basins within the development, and a further 3 within these green areas of open space within the development itself. So you can see the development as sort of area of housing, area of open space, area of housing, allotments in this position here with 6 parking spaces, another area of open space with a children's play area, further housing, open space, further housing. I have sought to sort of show that in a little bit more detail by going down into sections of the site, so hopefully you can see the proposals a bit more clearly. Once again, the access road, main road through the development. There's then a number of pathways that link through. So the intention with this pathway is to allow residents access down onto this part of School Road and then down into the village of Drayton itself. So creating those sort of pathway links in those positions. Doctor's surgery, as I mentioned on Manor Farm Close, there is a proposal to allow an area of land 23 metres deep for an expansion of the doctor's surgery. So that would then be available for the doctor's surgery to develop, whether that be the built surgery or an enhancement of the car parking facilities. And in addition, a footpath is provided from the rear of the development into that expansion area. So that once again, we've got those pedestrian linkages. It wouldn't be the case that people would be required to access the site all the way through the development. That way, there's a much more direct route to encourage pedestrian access. And I mentioned again about the pathway through the development to Manor Farm Close and off to Vaudrey Road that way. This is the tree belt that I spoke about, strong natural feature of the development, and that's been retained as part of the application with a pathway that then runs along the tree belt up towards the Reefham Road. Up to the next part of the site, so you can see the development as it extends further to the north. That's the allotment, so an access off of the Spine Road into the allotments with a car parking area there. An equipped children's play area on that part of the site there, surrounded by further open space, really just to break the development. So as you drive through the development, you come to this larger area of open space on both sides of the road, and a mixture of housing types. The dots here are the affordable housing units. This is then going further up the development. I should just go back one, sorry, and just, oh, gone the wrong way. Identify the residential properties at the end of Manor Farm Close. We've got existing housing here and the relationship between that existing housing and the proposed dwellings. This is a vacant part of Manor Farm Close, undeveloped, but will be housing there in due course. Then moving up through the development, we've then got Cater Road here. Currently Cater Road, just the road itself doesn't have a hammerhead, it just finishes at the end of the road. proposal to include a hammerhead within the development site to allow residents and delivery vehicles to turn and manoeuvre away. That would also allow a footpath link from the development into Cater Road at that point. Further up through the development of existing properties, Glebe Close, Highfield Road, and then this is the infant school. And the development wraps around the northern part of the infant school with an access out onto School Road here. And as I mentioned, the path then runs all the way up to the Reefham Road to allow pedestrian access out onto the existing network of green infrastructure paths. Members may recall this has planning history. So this was the previous outline application submitted under 2016-1066. Similar form, had two points of access, School Road and Hall Lane, still providing that route through and maintaining the expansion area to the doctor's surgery. This was only an outline application, so this plan's only indicative. At that time, the allotments were on that northern boundary. The current applicants have sought to locate that in a more central location within the development. Landscape concept plan, so identifying landscaping along the eastern boundary of the site. So this is the rural boundary to the site, and as much as possible sought to create a landscape buffer all the way around that developed edge to try and soften the development from the wider agricultural views of the site. And once again, you can see the areas of open space that are retained through the development to try and give that feeling of landscaping and open space entering into the development, not just being tucked out on the edge or something like that. Some indicative elevations now of the site. So this is the Hall Lane street scene elevation, the access into Hall Lane, and you can see that the dwellings here have been turned, so they've got a frontage to Hall Lane rather than having a line of rear boundary fences. So they've got a presence on the Hall Lane, which I think is quite a positive design feature for the development, and will help to integrate that into the Hall Lane street scene. Some examples of some of the house types. So we've got a range of house types: detached houses, semi-detached houses, and terraces. Obviously a whole suite range of different house types. Just pulled those ones out as examples really to give you an idea of the appearances that the applicant is seeking to develop. This is then the extent of the traffic calming area that I mentioned. So this takes into Carter Road, George Drive here, and Bone Road. Highway Authority have been very keen to ensure that it's that whole area that's included in the traffic calming zone, not just Carter Road. And as I said, I can refer to that on the assessment part of my presentation. That's just a further evidence of Carter Road, George Drive and Bone Road areas. Furthermore, as part of the proposals, the applicant is also seeking, this is at the northern part of the site, School Road entrance. The infant school is in this location here. The applicant is proposing to extend and widen the existing footpaths in front of the infant school. Currently, there's quite a wide grass verge, but a relatively narrow footpath. So the proposal is to widen the footpath, just to, once again, to encourage pedestrian access from the site into the school. And obviously that has wider benefits for other people accessing the school. And then at the southern end of the site here, down by the mini roundabout with Hall Lane and School Road, where I showed those pedestrian accesses coming out from the development, once again, that footpath is proposed to be widened to about 3 meters wide, just to, once again, allow that increased pedestrian movement onto the existing footpaths. Photographs of the site. So these are taken working from the northern part of the site, so up on School Road, then running down the boundaries of the site, running right the way back down to the south. But we start on School Road here. You can see the existing crossing that comes out of the Badgers Brook entrance there, running down, and then the site is on the left-hand side here. If I run through those photographs, this one here is running along the boundary to the infant school, housing proposed in this area here. This one is on the corner, right on that very corner. there, looking across the fields, looking out across to the east and the tree belt that I mentioned. Some of these are a bit clearer than others, apologies, but again, giving the context of the site and its surroundings, and the landscaping that exists along the site boundaries. This is then a view of the end of Cater Road, so we can see some of the existing hedgerows along Cater Road that are shown to be retained. These are the bungalows on Glebe Close, I think, where again we've got an area of landscaping which is all sought to be retained and safeguarded as part of the proposals. This is where the hammerhead would come into this area here for Cater Road to give them that turn-in facility. Then these are the properties that I mentioned at the northern end of Manor Farm Close, which currently obviously look out onto the fields where we are proposing housing in this location here. Then running down the boundary, so this is down the boundary of the western boundary of the properties on Manor Farm Close. Down here, you can see the field. So this area primarily is going to be open space to the rear of these properties. So these are the properties, the relatively new ones that have gone in along Manor Farm Close. This area here is undeveloped and there's an area of space. I think that footpath that I mentioned connects through into about that point there on Manor Farm Close. And then we can start to see on this plan here the doctor's surgery. So that post represents the area of expansion land that's to be given over to the doctor's surgery, which again is also shown here. Again, that's the doctor's surgery just in this position here. This area is all the open space, and these are the two listed buildings. The report refers to two listed buildings on Manor Farm Close, numbers 4 and 6, and they're those properties there. Once again, we've got open space to the rear of those properties. Part of the proposals on Hall Lane, there's 2 vacant properties which are to be demolished as part of the proposals. So that's those existing dwellings, and you can see here, this is the Hall Lane, and the entrance to the development will be in about this position here. Going down then down to Hall Lane, so housing, where I showed you that street scene, that'll be that street scene frontage running down the hill here, picking up the housing in the corner of Manor Farm Close. And then this is down at the bottom of School Road, looking back up at those houses there on the left-hand side. So this is going to be primarily an area of open space with the footpath connections coming through to facilitate the pedestrian access down onto School Road here, which is to be widened out. Bus stop in that position, you can see. And then behind where I took this photograph, you can then see the straight down into the village. There's a pedestrian crossing at this point here and a pedestrian crossing at the mini roundabout there. So pedestrians can easily walk down into the village and the village facilities. And then leave that slide up again, just so you can see the overall context of the site. Take you back to the report. As you said, the report identifies that the proposal has a mix of housing proposals comprising 1-bed flats, 4-bed houses, including 88 affordable homes, equating to 33% affordable housing in shared ownership and affordable rent tenures. The development also includes a range of building heights, including bungalows, 2-storey houses, 2.5-storey houses, and in one case, a block of 3-storey 1-bed flats. In addition, the development will provide through a Section 106 agreement for a range of other elements, some required by policy, others either followed on from the previous agreements or are enhancements offered by the applicant. These are the 33% affordable housing, recreation play space, open space provision, including allotments and the infiltration basins, the green infrastructure proposals that I've showed you on the plans, linking up to Reefham Road, together with land for the expansion of the doctor's surgery. Each of these elements are set out within your report. In addition, the applicant has offered to pay £50,000 to the Highway Authority to enter into a Section 278 agreement to design and deliver a traffic calming scheme in the Carter Road, George Drive area of Drayton to alleviate any impact as a result of this development. Further off-site highways works are proposed at the northern and southern ends of School Road as set out on the report and as I showed you on the plans. There are no updates to the report. All consultation replies remain as reported. In turning to the assessment, key issues for consideration are the principle of development, housing land supply, planning history of the site, including the previous 106s, impacts on highway safety, flood risk, character and appearance of the area, the listed buildings, landscaping and biodiversity, and residential amenities of neighbours. The report provides a detailed assessment of each of these, so I don't intend to repeat each one. I feel it's necessary to consider the issues of the planning policy, including the Drayton Neighbourhood Plan, flooding and drainage, and the amenities of neighbours specifically. Firstly, planning policy. The site lies adjacent to the settlement limit that has been defined for Drayton. Policy GC2 of the DMDPD states that outside of these limits, development which does not result in any significant adverse impact will be permitted, where it accords with a specific allocation and/or policy of the plan. The site has been allocated for housing under policy DRA1 of the site allocation DPD, and that was following the outline approval reference 2013-0885. This specifies a development of 200 dwellings, allotments and open space. Since the site allocation DPD was adopted in 2016, a further outline application for 250 dwellings, which is the one that I showed you, the reference 2016-1066, was approved in February 2020, which requires reserve matters application to be submitted not later than 17th of February next year. Paragraphs 5.10 to 13 of the report set out the site's planning history and the previous legal agreements that have been entered into. These are considered to be significant material considerations that weigh in favour of this application. It should be noted that Drayton is defined in the JCS as being located within the Norwich policy area, where approximately 33,000 new homes are to be built before 2026. And policy 12 of the JCS also defines Drayton as an urban fringe parish, capable of accommodating small and medium scale housing growth. Drayton Neighbourhood Plan includes policies which require high standards of design, sustainability and innovation, whilst reflecting the historic character of the village. These are aspects that are assessed within the design section of the report. Drayton is considered to be well served by a range of facilities and services, which are listed in paragraph 5.5 of your report. The housing allocation is an acceptance that this is a sustainable location for new residential development, and I consider, therefore, that the principle of development is acceptable. Turning now to flooding and drainage, surface water runoff has been a significant issue where development of this site is concerned. Heavy storm events cause rainwater runoff from the adjacent fields, which are at a higher level than parts of the site, and this tends to run over the site towards the low point on the site's southwestern corner, and in worst cases into the properties on Manor Farm Close. This application includes 2 large infiltration basins along the eastern boundary of the site and 3 further smaller basins in the open spaces within the development towards its southwest corner. These are designed to capture the surface water and allow it to soak into the ground. The lead local flood authority has considered the submitted flood risk assessment and drainage strategy and raised no objections, subject to the imposition of a condition that requires detailed designs of surface water drainage scheme to be submitted. Prior to the commencement of development and implemented prior to the first occupation. This condition is to be imposed, and maintenance of the basins will be included in the open space requirements in the section 106. In respect to the assessment of how the proposals impact residential amenities, this is evaluated at paras 5.25 to 28 of the report. It's noted objections have been received from neighbours, raising a range of reasons for objection. The western boundary of the development adjoins neighbouring properties, and the development has either been designed to provide open space to this boundary, or where dwellings are proposed, these in the main tend to be arranged so that its side elevation is towards the boundary, or the proposed dwelling or the existing neighbour is positioned at an angle to the boundary to avoid direct overlooking between respective rear windows. The existing natural boundary treatments will be retained to help safeguard the amenities of existing neighbours. The landscaping condition to be imposed will require details of boundary treatments along the western boundary to be submitted and agreed. On balance, I consider the proposals will not have a significant detrimental impact on the amenities of neighbouring properties. In conclusion, although the proposal is contrary to the policies of the development plan, based on the increase in the number of dwellings specified in the housing allocation, I consider the planning history and the extant outline application is a significant material consideration in this case, which warrants approval. the site is a sustainable location, and the delivery of additional housing means a more efficient use of the site can be achieved, making a positive contribution to the housing targets set out in the JCS for housing growth in the NPA. I consider the package of proposals that will be delivered as part of the Section 106 agreement and the 278 agreement for traffic calming proposals in Carter Road and George Drive will ensure both compliance with policies of the development plan, but also secure wider and much needed enhancements for the residents of the development and the village as a whole. Although local objections are noted, the statutory consultees have resolved not to object to the proposals in their revised form, and I consider there are no significant adverse impacts of the development. Therefore, on balance, I consider the proposals in their totality represent a form of development which should be approved. The recommendation, therefore, is to delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Planning to grant approval, subject to the satisfactory completion of a Section 106 agreement with heads of terms as set out in the report, and subject to the conditions as listed in your report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Officer Rook. And members, do we have any questions for the officer in relation to the presentation? Councillor Karimi Guvenlu.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Matthew.
Hi.
I've got 3 questions. Do you want me to give them one at a time or all at once?
Do them all at once.
Do them all at once. Okay. Right. Number 1, the Carter Road. The traffic going through Carter Road has come up at every SNAP meeting about the last 2 years. And I'm sure Councillor Folger will agree with me. What specific calming measures are being recommended there?
Okay, well, perhaps because they're long questions, I'll do them one at a time.
Okay.
The specifics of the traffic calming aren't before us today. The Highway Authority have asked for a fund, which has been paid or has been agreed at £50,000 to enable the scheme to be designed in consultation with the residents. So they're going to do a consultation exercise to look to see what the most appropriate form of traffic calming would be. In the past, there's been discussion about closing off part of Carter Road. Mm. I think my recollection in discussing with people from the parish council is that that was closer than the Brexit vote. I think it was tied, that they couldn't actually come to a view as to where the best place for that road closure should be. If you do it at the top end of Carter Road, and everyone's got to come down onto the Drayton High Road. If you do it on the Carter Road, everyone's got to go up onto the Hall Lane. It's one that at this stage, all that I was seeking with the Highway Authority was agreement from the developers who are due to speak that they are prepared to pay a fund which has increased from the previous 106 from 30,000 to 50,000, and that they are looking to implement that upon the first occupation of the development. So it's still to be resolved, but it will be resolved, and it'll be resolved in agreement with the residents.
Okay, so that 50,000 is just for the investigation into the calming. It's not to
both. It's
for both, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The other question is on the western boundary, the landscape buffer around there. Was there any discussion on whether to maybe do that similar as to the Thorpe Marriott Greenway and make a wider buffer with the path through with trees?
There was some discussion, I think, because the development previously had these green infrastructure pathways going out further. You know, they're going out beyond the development of the site itself. They're going out onto the Reefham Road. So no, it's something that we mentioned, but the applicants are content that there's enough permeability, sort of pedestrian movement through the development without having to get into that tree belt itself.
See, I have a few problems with the Reefham Road. I can't see people walking along the Reefham Road on a pathway, to be honest, because they're not really going to get very far, are they? It's quite a long walk into Halsford.
Well,
if there was a buffer around the western boundary between the existing housing and the new housing, people would use that. The Thorpe Marriott Greenway is used a hell of a lot by residents walking their dogs and whatever, and it would be a buffer between the existing housing and the new housing as well.
I think it's one of those, it's a difficult one, and it's said that people wouldn't do it until it's been offered. It's difficult to know what they would do. But I know pedestrian, a lot of people do walk around, and currently, certainly with the pandemic, people are looking for new paths and new ways to explore the countryside. It would be from my mind, I'm looking at it as a potential, maybe some sort of trod, so you could have cycle movements along there as well. So rather than cyclists cycling along the Reefham Road, with other vehicles close to them, they could then get onto that pathway and cycle clear of the roadway. So I take your point, but I personally think it would be used.
Okay, last question. Are there any self-build plots on this development?
No.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just looking through, I can't see any reference anywhere to provision of public parking as opposed to private driveways, which would tend to imply that any visiting vehicles would automatically be parking on the highway. So is there any provision for what I would term either public or overspill parking within this, Matthew?
Off the top of my head, no. That maybe something the developers have designed the scheme up so they'll know much more inside out than myself. Obviously, you've got on-street parking around the development that could be achieved. The Highway Authority have considered the scheme, have raised no objections to that. The scheme as you see before you. I think it's been designed on the basis of on-site parking rather than visitor bays and things like that around the site. But if the agents are on the call, and if that's something they can pick up through their presentation, I'm sure they can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't have any further. Has anyone else got anything that they need to say? I haven't noticed anyone. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. We will now move on to our public speaking, and we don't have any representatives from the parish council. However, we have a resident, Mr. Graham Everett, or Councillor Everett, but he's addressing us as just a resident today. It's good to see you, Mr. Everett. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I just need to advise you that you will have 5 minutes to address the committee. Unfortunately, we still don't have a clock that we can show you, so the host will advise you when you have 1 minute. Is that acceptable to you?
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, lovely. If you can please introduce yourself, and you have 5 minutes from now.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Councillor mentioned, I'm speaking today as a resident of Drayton, impacted by this development and in no other capacity. Manor Park, Drayton. Deja vu. Yes, we have been here before. The first outline application was submitted in 2013, 8 years ago, with a further application submitted in 2016. 5 years later, there's still been no progress. For those who have been on this committee any length of time, they've noted I've spoken at every previous application, always objecting to the scheme. So why am I here today supporting this application? What is different? What has changed? As Matthew Rook has mentioned, this part of Drayton is in a critical drainage area. It's susceptible to surface water flooding. My objection has always been around surface water flooding, not the principle of development. I live in a house that was in a part of the field years ago. I was never convinced that the drainage proposals in the previous applications would address the surface water flooding risk. So I want to start by thanking the applicant for taking Drayton residents' flooding concerns seriously by proposing a much improved drainage scheme. This will not only include an infiltration basin at the southeast corner of the site on Hall Lane, as was in the previous application, will now include another large basin again on the east side of the development, but further north on the site, which is the critical area and the area residents always felt was needed addressing. There'll also be two further basins behind the properties on Manor Farm Close, again, which is another key area, and a smaller one again near Hall Lane, but closer to School Road. The applicant will provide substantial tree and hedge planting, along with a detailed maintenance schedule for the basins. I believe the combination of all these measures will address the long-standing surface water flooding concerns of Drayton residents. We are all aware in planning terms an applicant is not required to address already known problems purely to make sure their development does not add to them problems. Again, I want to thank the applicant. I believe that will do both. That will address the concerns previously and also any concerns of this development. As you just heard, in addition to this, we'll be transferred land to the doctor's surgery. I noticed interest in the last application, lots of talk about the doctor's surgery. Drayton serves a large area, including Horsford, St Fays, etc., etc. There are further developments in Drayton. This expansion is necessary. Again, so I thank the applicant for considering that. The only question I would ask, could this transfer of land please be in the early phase of development? So as the site is being constructed, there's access to vehicles to construct the doctor's surgery. They will look to expand the building. That is a much needed facility. There will also be a transfer of, as you've heard, there'll be excellent new footpaths. I hear the concern raised before about the main footpath out, which is from Drayton Infant School on School Road through to Reefham Road. That is much needed. People walk down there currently now without a footpath. That is very risky. This will give the opportunity to cross the Reefham Road over the NDR, Broadland Northway Bridge, onto Dog Lane and Horsford. You can then walk easily into Horsford. Again, you could walk through to Drayton Drury, where an application was considered before. So that will take away the need to take your motor car there. You can walk from Drayton. So you could actually walk from the centre of Drayton all the way through to Drayton Drury if you are a keen walker. As Mr. Wook has mentioned previously, that is very, very important to people currently. In summary, this application should address the long-standing surface water flooding. It will provide 88 affordable dwellings. It's an excellently laid out scheme. It's a thoroughly excellent public consultation event laid on by people where they took concerns there. I would encourage members to go with officers' recommendation and approve this application, and maybe see if there's any way to get the actual transfer of land in the early phase of the development. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Members, do you have any questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. It was good to see you, and very much appreciated. Okay, we will now move on to our second, third and fourth speakers today. We have Mr. Lieberman, we have Jeff Armstrong, and we have Mr. David Jones. Can I just ask, gentlemen, how would you like to proceed with this? Are you all planning on speaking for 5 minutes, or do you want to take it as it comes?
Thank you, Chair. If I could respond on that, my name is Jonathan Lieberman, the head of planning at Hopkins Homes. I'll be giving a speech. My colleagues Jeff Armstrong and David Jones are here as planning consultants to answer any questions if necessary.
Okay, perfect. If you could please, you have introduced yourself, so you're aware that you have a 5-minute timescale. You're aware that the host will advise you when you have 1 minute left. Is that acceptable to you?
That is, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. You have 5 minutes from now.
Thank you, Chair and members. The case officer has provided a comprehensive overview of this application, which I don't propose to repeat. We've worked closely with your officers both before and after submitting the application to arrive at a scheme which is supported by statutory consultees and which builds on the principles established by the Outline Planning Permission for 250 dwellings. As you'll be aware, the site is an existing allocation and also a proposed allocation for approximately 250 homes in the emerging Greater Norwich local plan. Prior to submission, we carried out extensive community engagement, and this has helped inform scheme design and layout. This has included a well-attended public exhibition and a meeting with Drayton Parish Council in late 2019. We also note and welcome the support today from Mr. Everett. Hopkins Homes is an award-winning developer who has an excellent track record of delivery, and we are fully committed to progressing this site as soon as possible. Subject to receiving planning permission today, we anticipate commencing development in the summer of this year, with the first dwelling completed mid-2022 and all dwellings completed by the end of 2027. We've designed what we consider an attractive development that will provide significant benefits, and just to reiterate, that includes the provision of 88 policy compliant affordable homes, new allotments and land to allow the expansion of the doctor's surgery. A range of house types are proposed, including smaller 1 and 2 bedroom dwellings and bungalows, together with new public open space, play areas and sustainable urban drainage systems. I can confirm that there's no objection from the Highway Authority, and the proposal would deliver the highway improvements requested, together with the necessary financial obligations. As has been mentioned, this includes traffic calming in the Carter Road George Drive area, which would be secured via a 278 agreement. So just to clarify, that would mean that the works would be funded and carried out by us following a consultation exercise on behalf of the county, effectively. Also, as been mentioned, we are aware that flooding was an issue, and that's been integral to the scheme design, and we're pleased that the lead local flood authority has raised no objection to the scheme. The proposed drainage strategy will have the benefit of improving current surface water runoff issues in the village, and this would be achieved by intercepting off-site overland flows into the proposed infiltration basins. So in summary, this detailed scheme very much builds on the concepts and principles agreed as part of the outline permission and has been prepared in close consultation with your officers and the local community. We are pleased that it comes before you with a recommendation to approve, and we hope that you're in a position to support the application today. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, does anyone have any questions in relation to the public speaker? Okay, and I'm assuming that the other two gentlemen are happy that we then move on to the discussion. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings our public speaking to a close. Members, we will now have open discussion in relation to the application in front of us. You will remain unmuted as a committee. Please can I ask if you'd like to comment or ask any questions that you advise myself or our host in the chat. Okay, do we have anybody? Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, nice to see you again, Graham. Previous planning member, miss you greatly. And first of all, Matthew, can I just say, I'm always impressed by your presentations and the way you clearly go through it. And once again, good job done there, Matthew. In terms of the application, with the previous consents that was here in terms of outlining and all the policies that are quoted, policies that have been quoted in support of the application, in my mind, all material matters have been considered and mitigation made, and therefore there is no question in my mind that really we should be supporting this application. And straight away, Joe, I'd actually make a move on that, and I'm moving it. I'm pleased that the developers actually listened and amendments have been made. It's a refreshing approach, I think, as well, and the engagement that's taken place. Yes, so I propose that we accept this application.
I'll second that, Madam
Okay,
Chairman.
thank you. Thank you. Councillor Karimi Gubenlu.
I noticed there's quite a big leap playground area there. Could some consideration be given into providing equipment for disabled children? Maybe a wheelchair accessible roundabout or some sensory equipment there?
Yep, that's heard and understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any further comments, questions?
Chairman, yes, I can.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Butcher, off you go.
Yeah, yes, I think this is a very satisfactory development. Now, obviously, changes have been made during the course of the development of the plans. I'm very pleased that the situation regarding Carter Road and adjoining streets and roads has been covered, because clearly there is a lot of concern there about the impact of this, but that is has been addressed, and I'm very pleased to note that. And clearly other aspects have been addressed, and I'm very pleased to lend my support to the recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, with regard to Carter Road, I've been quite heavily involved in that right from about 2013, when this Manor Park development was first proposed. And Matthew was right that when they done a, well, I suppose a referendum almost, it was 50-50. But the interesting point was that it came out that 82% of the residents in the Carter Road actually wanted it closed. Since 2013, the traffic has increased tremendously. There's also a development on the Drayton High Road itself, which is almost directly opposite Carter Road. I strongly suspect that given the fact that there's been traffic increases in George Drive as well, I strongly suspect you might get a different result to closure than what you had in 2013. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And yes, I'd like to reiterate thank you to Officer Rook for all the time and the effort into the developers. Discussion is good to talk, and it's good to see that this talking has come up with an acceptable development. Well, hopefully we'll find out in a minute whether the committee agree to it. So has anybody else got anything else that they'd like to point out before we go? Okay, it's been proposed by Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Ward. Councillor Ward?
No, Adams.
Adams, apologies.
Adams.
Apologies.
Adams.
That's all right, Sue, don't worry.
The starch difference.
Apologies. Okay, I'll start again. It's been proposed by Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Adams, that we should, as a committee, agree to delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Planning to approval of this application, subject to completion of Section 106 agreement and the conditions as stated on page 72, 73 and 74. If you could please go to the vote, Officer Matthews, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So if members could indicate if they are for or against the proposed approval. Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Beadle.
For.
Councillor Brennan.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Folger.
For.
Councillor Karimi Givenloo.
For.
Councillor Lawn.
For.
Councillor Leggett.
For.
Councillor Prutton.
For.
Councillor Riley.
For.
Councillor Ward.
For.
Chairman, that's unanimously carried.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Now, thank you for your time, gentlemen. It's very much appreciated, and it's good to see you, Councillor Everett.
Oh dear.
You are missed. Okay, thank you. So we will have a 5-minute break now. So if you could all be back at your, back at your screen, turn your screens off and turn your mute yourselves, and be back at 11:40, please.
That's a picture of a totally relaxed dog.
Waiting for a couple of our councillors to come back. And then, good. Just waiting for Councillor Leggett to turn this video back on again, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Councillor Leggett, but we can't see you.
Oh, that's strange. Why is that?
Because your video isn't turned on.
Yes, it should be.
Councillor Leggett, I've requested that you turn it. Oh, you're on now.
Oh.
There you are. We can see you. Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We will just quickly proceed with the roll call, just for the record, to say that we are all back in the room.
Chairman. Councillor Adams.
Present.
Councillor Beadle.
Present.
Councillor Brennan.
Present.
Councillor Fisher.
Here.
Councillor Folger. Councillor Folger, can you turn your camera on and unmute yourself?
Oh, I don't know.
He was here a few seconds ago.
Yes, yeah, he was. We can come if we go. We can come back to Councillor.
Okay. Councillor Creamy Govan-Lou.
Present.
Councillor Lawn.
Present.
Councillor Leggett.
Present.
Councillor Prutton.
Present.
Councillor Riley.
Present.
And Councillor Ward.
Present.
So we're still not sure if we've got Mr. Folger with us or not, Chairman.
Okay, let's just give him a few seconds. Can I just check, whilst we're waiting for Councillor Filter to come back, Leah, have we got Nick Hoffman, Tracy Lister and Dale Cooper in the room?
Can you hear us, Councillor Folger?
Councillor Adams has gone. Councillor
Councillor
Fulcher. We've got Councillor Fulcher back and we've lost Councillor Adams. Here we are. Okay, let's go. And just for confirmation, Councillor Fulcher, can you hear us? No, he's got to go.
It's muted.
Councillor Fulcher, are you okay? Can you? You're muted. Leah, can you unmute Councillor Fulcher?
Requested. Sorry, Councillor
Well,
Fulcher.
we can see that Councillor Fulcher is here, so hopefully he's not having any difficulties with his connection, and we'll go with the presentation. We can see him. We know that hopefully he's hearing us.
Yeah, could I make a suggestion? If he puts his hand up, we know he's heard us.
He's. Have you said he's just left?
Well,
Leah,
his camera's off again, Chair.
Yeah.
The presentation to be able to then vote on it.
Yeah. Councillor Fulcher, can you hear? Can you put your hand up to say you can hear us? Can you hear us? Yeah. Yes, he can hear us. Okay, so we're just a bit concerned that if we lose you again, then you might not be able to vote on if you haven't heard the full presentation. So you think you're okay? I think you stay with us now. Okay, we will. We'll keep assessing the situation, but we will move on with the presentation. And it's Councillor Officer Burgess, please. Oh, did I? I haven't even introduced it. Apologies. The third application is application 2020-2268. It's Dairy Farm, Wroxham Road, Colchester. And if you can, we've got the public speakers in place, so that's fine. And Councillor Officer Burgess, if you'd like to go, please.
Certainly, Chair. Yeah, thank you. Thank you again. Hello again, everyone. Yeah, so this is Dairy Farm, Wroxham Road in Colchester, and the application is for the demolition of an existing barn and the replacement with 2 dwellings and associated garages plus private drive. Now, this application is at committee again because it's contrary to provisions of the development plan. So I'll just take you through a few slides just to give us where we are in terms of the location. The site is highlighted here in red on the Wroxham Road. Going back, if we look this way to the northwest, we have the settlement of Colchester, the River Bure over here to give us the context. Closer, we see that the property is opposite some residential properties on the other side of the Wroxham Road. And to the west, we have a residential complex that were barns that have been converted, known as Abbey Court. Just to give you the wider context, this is the settlement limit in here of Colchester within that red line. The red areas that are filled, they're the proposed allocations in the area. This area is outside of the Broadland district area because it's the Broads area, and if we follow this blue line in this bottom corner, it takes us to the site in here, and as we'll see, it is clearly outside of the settlement limit or any allocations. But there is some context to this, and that's the reason why it's at committee, which I'll talk through properly in the assessment. But through the prior approval class Q, the properties does have permission, the barn does have permission to convert to 2 residential properties. You'll see that's within the red line area there. The blue land is other land that the applicant owns. That will be talked about much more in the assessment. And then this is what has been approved through that prior approval process, i.e. the conversion of those barns to those residential properties. You'll see that it retains the existing barn and adds some walls in and around and some windows to make it into that residential property. We'll see the barn in a couple of slides' time. And then this slide had been proposed because it just gives a bit of context. This site is a tree that's on the site currently, this star, and it just allows us to look when we look at the next slide as to where that star is, where that tree is. So if we flip between the two, you'll see that's the existing barn, the square in there, that's that star, and then these are the proposed 2 new dwellings. So you'll see that that's plot 1, that's plot 2, and then down here is a garage to serve plot 1 and the garage to serve plot 2 in this location here. And then some further land within the ownership of the applicant has been given for the gardens to the rear of these properties, 2 detached properties. And we have slides that show you what these proposed properties would look like. So this is plot 1. And what we have as we work through them, this south elevation is the front one that would face onto that Wroxham Road, albeit set back into the property. These are the elevations that, this is the rear elevation. You'll see there's an enclosed veranda area there. This is the west elevation looking towards the residential properties up at Abbey Court. You'll see that area, the veranda area, has been screened, so there should be no overlooking towards that direction. And this is the elevation to the other side, out onto the open fields of plot 1. That's just to give you a 3D view of what the properties would look like. This one then moves on to plot 2, and again, similar in style, obviously, to the other property that we've just seen, albeit a slightly smaller scale, and similar with that sort of rear veranda to the property. Again, just gives you the 3D view of what that property would propose to look like. This shows you what those garages would look like, taking a sort of more rural cart shed type feel to them, and during the course of the application, they have been reduced in scale and size as well. And then moving on to some photographs. This is how we approach the site from the east, going along Wroxham Road towards Colchester. This is the access to the site in here, and you'll see you don't really get to see the site properly until you're on the next slide, which is when you get past that line of trees and you start to see where that existing barn is, and you'll see it has a hedgerow here to its eastern side. And then you'll start to see the residential properties there of Abbey Court in the distance beyond the boundary of the site. So this gives us a panoramic view of the site. It's not turned out as well as we'd have liked. It's sort of fish-eyed, but in effect, that's the access to the site. That's the existing barn, and this is the Abbey Court. I think you start to see the access here and that relationship with the barn looking from the west, coming from Coltishall. And then this is the access to those properties on Abbey Court. And you'll see, as we'll see in a couple of slides' time, there was a leyland hedge along this line that has now been removed and it wasn't protected. So that's considered appropriate and acceptable. These are the properties on the other side of the road. And you'll see, whilst not in exactly the same form and character of the properties that are proposed, they are similar in a way. And that just gives you an idea of the barn again. So go back to that Part Q prior approval. You'll see there's a substantial part of the barn that is enclosed, but these areas aren't at the moment, and all of it would need to be replaced and new walls put in there to convert that. That's the barn, just to show you how it is. This shows you a view from the rear of the site. It does look out into open fields. This gives you that sort of northeastern corner of the site. This is the hedgerow to the rear of Abbey Court. You can just make out the properties in there. And that's the barn that we're talking about that has that Part Q prior approval. And the residential properties would be in there at a slightly higher level. That's the site plan again. And what we have here is just talks about that hedgerow that I talked through before, which you'll see very clearly has recently been removed. This one gives it very clearly how it's been removed, but it gives you a clear view of where those residential properties are, the Roxham Road ones, the Abbey Court ones I've referred to. And then I'll just leave you on this site plan just whilst I talk you through the assessment. So the key considerations are detailed on pages 80 to 83 of the agenda and specifically pick up on the principle of development, the impact on the character and the appearance of the area, and the impact on residential amenity, as well as the highway safety. I'll just talk through those now. So looking at the principle of the development, the site is outside of the settlement limit that's been defined for Coltishall and is in the countryside. So policy GC2 of the Development Management DPD permits new development in the countryside where it would not result in any significant adverse impact and where it accords with a specific allocation and or policy of the development plan. The site's not been allocated for development, as I've referred to on the plan before, and the proposal does not comply with another policy of the local plan that allows residential development in the countryside, an agricultural workers dwelling or something like that. However, material to the determination of this application, as I've touched upon, is that there is an extant permission granted via the Class Q prior approval process to convert the barn into two dwellings. So taking account of that and the reasonable prospect of their conversion, it's considered that the principle of constructing two new dwellings instead of converting the barn is considered acceptable by officers and perhaps in some ways could be preferable given their design. Moving to the impact on the character and appearance of the area. So I showed in the presentation that the site clearly sits in a rural setting. The floor space is comparable to that which could be provided under the Class Q prior approval. And although at 8.3 metres high, the houses will be approximately 1.9 metre higher than the existing barn. The dwellings will be visible through filtered views to the north, south and west, or quite open views to the east as well. And it's accepted, therefore, that if these dwellings were to be approved, then the character of the site would change. But taking account of the minimal landscape views of the site and the acceptable design approach, which has been considered by our senior heritage and design officer, officers consider that the character of the wider area will be maintained. Moving on to residential amenity, during the course of the application, concerns were raised by occupants of the neighbouring properties to the west at the prospect of overlooking from the balcony of plot 2 and the first floor side windows as referred to. So subsequently, during the course of the application, it was amended to enclose the balcony such there were no views to the west and the secondary bedroom window was omitted. So this is left on the plans a roof light serving the attic and a first floor bathroom window. So in officer's opinion, given the spaces that these windows will serve, it's not considered that intrusive overlooking will arise from the new property. Furthermore, given the level of separation, officers are satisfied that the dwellings and garages will relate appropriately to each other and to neighbouring properties to the west and on the opposite side of Wroxham Road without appearing overbearing. Just moving finally on to highway safety before the recommendation. So Norfolk County Council have raised no objection to the application site, subject to the imposition of a series of conditions which have been highlighted in the agenda in the report. But nevertheless, the Parish Council and the neighbour have set out their view that a footpath should be constructed that better connects the site to the village of Colchester. But it should be borne in mind that as part of the extant consent to convert the barns under Class Q, there was no requirement for the footpath to be provided. It's also considered by officers that the provision of a footpath of upwards of 200 metres in length is not proportionate to the amount of development being proposed. It's likely to have impact on trees and hedges that bound Wroxham Road and would also require third-party land. So moving on to the recommendation, it's another one of these that's on balance is considered that even though the site is outside of the settlement limit, the barns can be converted into 2 dwellings with a similar floor space to the proposed dwellings as a viable fallback and as a material consideration that weighs in the favour of the application. So given this, and as per page 84 of the agenda, the committee is recommended to approve the application subject to the conditions highlighted on the same page. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for the officer in relation to the presentation? No? Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Karimi.
Sorry, me again. I'm a bit confused. Can you tell me that the previous planning application was a conversion of the agricultural buildings, but this one is a new 1 foot, the demolition of that barn and replacing with 2 buildings. How did we get from one to the other? I can't understand the rationality behind that.
So apologies, I've not been clear enough with that. So what the applicant has approval for currently is in effect permitted development. So through Class Q, the prior approval of that scheme means that they can convert the barn as is to residential properties. So what we're saying here on balance is that, yes, this is outside of the settlement limit, but the fallback the applicant has is to convert those barns. It's a sort of slight quirk in the system in some ways, in that what we're now saying is that, well, actually, wouldn't the benefit be to have 2 properly designed bespoke dwellings in that location rather than having to convert an old barn into residential properties?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll leave that with you to think on that one. Okay, so do we have any further questions? No. Okay, great. I think we'll move on to our public speaking. And if I could please ask, we don't have any representatives from the Parish Council, but we do have 2 residents, Nick Hoffman and Tracy Lister, and they would like to address the committee. So Officer Arthurton, could you please unmute Ms. Lister? Okay, thank you. And welcome this morning, Ms. Lister. Thank you very much for attending our meeting. If I can just explain that you will have 5 minutes to address the committee, and we unfortunately don't have a clock that would advise you what your time is. So the host will advise you 1 minute before your 5 minutes is up and advise you that you have got 1 minute left. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Lovely. If you could please introduce yourself to the committee, and you will have 5 minutes starting from now.
Thank you. So good morning, Chair and members. My name is Tracy Lister and I've been a resident of Abbey Court for over 15 years, which is situated to the west of the proposed development. And at the time of Abbey Court Barns being developed, they won a Broadland Award for design. One question I have is to whether planners had seen the site. Obviously this morning you've been seeing pictures of the site so far, but the aerial view pictures are showing the Lelandii still in place. This was a thick growing Lelandii of great height that protected Abbey Court from any images of the original site of the barn, which I have to say has not been an attractive site over the years, but not a problem for us. Since the felling of the Lelandii, and I understand that it's permissible, the landscape has significantly changed, giving a very different view from the west side. I myself, sitting in my property now, have a clear view straight through to look at the barn. And I would prefer to see a nicely developed site. However, we need a consideration for the planning permission that when you viewed that site, the trees were in place. They were not imposing on us. And now I believe that with the trees gone, they are now going to be looking straight into all of my garden. I have no other protection other than a 5-foot panel fence, which we put up ourselves, and straight into all of our properties. Our neighbouring property, Mr. Hoffman, again, he has a secondary hedge growing, but it is not going to cover anything that is going to stand tall, as tall. The roof height of the houses and garages, I think, exceed anything opposite or beside the site. Aside from the fact this site is outside of development boundary, the original proposal was for the existing barn, much like the barns that were converted by the same family in the 80s, which is now known as Abbey Court, so which was to be converted. That has now changed. Again, I'm not quite sure how that has come around. And I don't believe we actually oppose the development of the site. It would be nicer to see something more attractive, but we would just like some assurance that the privacy of Abbey Court is maintained and doesn't have a detrimental impact. If you were to come from the west side up Broxham Road from Coltishall at a different angle, I think you'd be quite horrified at the view that now stands there from the front of Abbey Court and all of the neighbouring west properties. So I thank you for your time and for your considerations in these planning matters, and hopefully for my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker this morning? Okay, thank you. That's lovely. We will move on to our second speaker, and we have Mr. Nick Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman, are you unmuted at the moment? Yes, you are. Okay, if I could just remind you that you will have 5 minutes to address the committee. The host will advise you whenever you have 1 minute remaining. Is that acceptable to you?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, if you could please introduce yourself to the committee, and you have 5 minutes starting from now.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nick Hoffman. My family and I live at 55 Roxham Road, which is the house immediately to the west of the proposed development site, neighbouring Tracy's property, where we have lived for the last 23 years. We are strongly opposed to the plans as they stand at present, based on the fact that they will remove all of our privacy, which we have enjoyed since we moved here in 1997. Our objections were previously outlined in written correspondence with the planning officer. I will add further comment today on the developments since then, which we feel are important. The trees that Tracy mentioned that did exist between our house and dairy farm have since been removed in their entirety, removing any privacy we had from the proposed development site. Now the trees are gone, it is very clear to see how a hedge would provide no meaningful privacy in our home or garden. The house at plot 2 would sit right on the boundary of our property, with nothing obstructing our view of it or its view of us. Given that an excellent existing privacy screen has been removed against our wishes, we request the attachment of a condition for compulsory planting of substantial trees along the west boundary of the development site between our property and plot 2, in addition to a hedge, should planning permission ultimately be granted. These concerns, specifically around screening with trees, appear to have been ignored in the planning officer's report. Revised plans for the west elevation of plot 2 were uploaded to the planning portal on February the 9th, and subsequent to my prior written correspondence. We continue to strongly object to the inclusion of windows to the first and second floor of plot 2, looking directly west over our property. These would completely remove the private enjoyment of our garden, which was one of the primary reasons we bought our house in the first place, and which we so greatly care for. Given the large number of other windows to the house at plot 2, we certainly feel these are an unnecessary addition. Following a request from the planning officer, the developer submitted revised plans for the double garages with the removal of the dormer windows and accommodation over. However, the pitch and the height of the roof remains very high and is suddenly out of character with the size and scope of all of the garages at Abbey Court to the west. In addition, the plan submitted also had written annotations which included mention of a room over the garage and electricity submeter. We remain very concerned that the planning officer's request to remove any second story to these garages will be circumvented, and that the garages will simply be converted to additional dwellings or ancillary accommodation in due course. We strongly object to this, since these garages will overlook our property. Even considering the removal of permitted development rights for roof lights looking west, the developer previously submitted plans, including an external staircase with platform, which would directly overlook our property. This would remove our privacy. In addition, commercial premises available for short-term lets will lead to more traffic and additional noise in a quiet rural location. We would ask that were planning permission to be granted, that either the height and pitch of the garages is reduced further to prevent this possibility, or conditions are attached which would permanently prevent the garages from being converted to accommodation at a later date. Finally, our understanding for the development at Dairy Farm was for there to be 2 semi-detached dwellings on the existing barn footprint. The plans currently proposed are for 2 very large separate dwellings of significantly greater height than the existing barn and split over 3 stories. The house at plot 2 will sit much closer to the boundary of our property than the existing barn does at present, and without the tree screening, which is now being removed. This will create an imposing presence right on the boundary of our private garden. We do not feel the scale and style of the proposed plans is in keeping with the cottages to the south or the converted barns at Abbey Court to the west. We would request that the committee carefully considers revised proposals of a reduced size and height befitting the location, surrounds, and need for privacy before planning permission is granted. Thank you for hearing my comments and concerns.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Just before we go to ask members if they'd like any questions, can I just ask Officer Burgess, just to address the issue with the screening, losing the leyland trees, can we just advise the members of the public that as a planning, we don't have any enforcement to put a condition on them for a screening to be put in place? Is that right?
Yeah, well, to an extent, yeah. So I think take the first instance, there was no, we didn't have any means to stop them from removing them in the first place. They weren't protected. We wouldn't necessarily look to protect leyland hedging. I know they were large, so it's probably more considered as a hedging, but again, we had no request necessarily to do so. In terms of what's been proposed, there is a landscaping scheme that's been proposed, but we have also put a condition on. It's condition 4 that requires the submission of a landscaping scheme. So we can certainly consider with our landscape officers and our tree officers what would be the appropriate boundary along there. But at the moment on the plans, what is shown, and just give me a second, is it says that there would be, the boundary would be replaced with fast-growing, smaller, more aesthetically pleasing hedge as requests to provide screening, and then the northwestern boundary, existing close-bordered 1.2 metre high fence to have a 0.8 metre high willow weave trellis installed. So at the moment, that's what the landscaping plans are proposed, but we have also, in effect, doubled up on that by putting a condition on.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And Councillor Riley, do you have a question for the members speaking?
Thank you,
members
Chair,
of the public. Okay, thank you.
Is it sorry, you've mentioned that the hedging was removed, and then you also said about against your wishes. Could you inform me as to if you know why the existing hedging was removed?
So the initial reason stated was because it was a condition on the purchase of the land from the existing landowner, that the purchase was conditional on removing those trees. Subsequent to a couple of those trees being cut down, we made clear to the existing landowner and the developer that that was very much against our wishes. And then the reason was restated as to why those trees were being cut down, in that it was because of the proposal to build a house on plot 2, which would only be possible if those trees were cut down.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you for that.
Okay, any further questions from members to our public speakers? No, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our third and final speaker on this application, Mr. Dale Cooper. Mr. Cooper, is Mr. Cooper unmuted? Yes, there you are. Thank you. Mr. Cooper, if I could just advise you, you will have 5 minutes to address the committee. The host will advise you when you have 1 minute remaining. Is that acceptable to you?
Yes, that is, yes.
And if you could please just introduce yourself to the committee, and you have 5 minutes starting from now.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dale Cooper, the applicant for these proposals. I'm not the landowner. I just wanted to make myself available to really answer any questions or add clarity as required to any points raised, such as the points that the trees have not been removed in their entirety. They were just the leylandi that were removed. The houses are not 3 stories; they are only 2 stories. But I think that those are the sort of the main points, that all of the overlooking issues were removed by the revisions to the designs, leaving just a bathroom window overlooking, which would obviously be obscure, and a Velux which sits above head height in a loft, just to add natural light to save clicking on a switch when you go into a loft. So that's really all I needed to say, and just to make myself available for questions, really.
Okay, thank you. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Cooper? Okay, Councillor Karimi Gugalnu.
So are you confirming that the loft area is not going to be a habitable area? It's only for loft storage?
Correct. That is, yes, we just have Veluxes, yeah, for natural light.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any further questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your time. That will bring our public speaking to a close. And members, we will now go into open discussion in relation to the application in front of us. You will remain unmuted as a committee, and please can I ask if you have any comment or questions that you address them through myself or the host. And do we have anybody who would like to start off the discussion? Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in the in the contributions that have been made and in reading the report, I do have some concerns around this. The question that was asked of Caroline to the officer in terms of how do we get to the 2 plot issue, is that the Q1 status, of course, is in reference normally to the existing barn building. So it's in the rural countryside. You maintain that and you convert the existing barn height, width, etc. Pretty strict. We've had this before at planning and on delegated authority. What we're now moving to is two buildings that are actually not just in that location. So we're not talking about just demolishing a barn which you can't really convert because it's in such a dilapidated state. We're actually, and that footprint. So the footprint for the existing barn, we've now got a building being put up that's not on that footprint. So the setting in the landscape changes. So I've got a problem with that in terms of the policy around that, which is what we're supposed to be looking at in terms of that Q1, etc. There's a problem with that. I think also there seems to be an issue with the roof heights as well. It's stated in the report that it's 8.3 metres high, and then there's also other reference in the report that it's 1.9 metre higher than the existing, which is again another issue in terms of view and the setting in the landscape outside of the settlement limits. Also, the sustainability of this as well. There's also reference, as you know, in NPPF and local development plan in terms of sites have to be sustainable. We know that historical buildings, they are what they are, and the roads and the lanes are what they are. I know that area really well. Just used to live just 3 miles down the road to it. I do know the site actually. Putting in these other dwellings, there is no footpaths down that road whatsoever. And I think there is a point that's been made by the CPRA in terms of the unsustainable location. So again, I've got concern around that. We've had this before about putting a new dwelling in where there is actually in the countryside where there is no footpaths whatsoever. And we've had officers in the past as well actually say you shouldn't approve it on that basis. I know it's all about balance and mitigation, etc. But for those reasons, I've got serious concern about this. And also just in terms of the chairman's comments to the officer, it's entirely reasonable in this local authority and other local authorities. I've seen it all over the place. for conditions to be put in for screening. And I understand what Ben said, there has been some condition putting in there. Perhaps that actually, if it goes ahead, would need perhaps tweaking to improve that, bearing in mind what the residents have said. And now there's a clear view going all the way through. So yeah, I'll make those comments, Chair, and I don't know if they want to be picked up or, but they are real concerns I've got at the moment with this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ward?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. What we have here are two attractive houses that sit very well in a countryside setting. I can't see how anybody would rather have the old converted barn than these two properties. They're so much more attractive. And why anybody, again, would want to screen the view of them, I just don't understand. I'm very happy with this application and I move the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Leggett? You're muted, Councillor Leggett. Councillor Leggett, you're... yeah, okay, lovely, thank you.
I'd like to second that. I support what Councillor Ward said.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Karimi?
I must say, I am concerned about the screening of the houses for 55 and 53 Wroxham Road. Looking at the picture here, they're with the new house that's going to be built on plot 2, they're going to completely overlook the back gardens there. So I can't see why Councillor Ward got no objections to the screening.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Fisher?
Thank you. Really, just picking up on both those points. Could Ben, whether we could go back to that diagram, in fact, that Councillor Karimi Lou was referring to, and what is the exact distance from the property to the neighbours? I think Ben did refer to. I think he referred to it as being a suitable distance. But I mean, again, I do concur with Councillor Ward's comments. I think they are both a very well designed house, and certainly I would much sooner look at those than actually a bunch of Lowlandais and an ugly barn in the background. But I'd just like Councillor Ben to just answer that, and also whether there could be a condition attached to the current list of conditions that would prevent any occupation of the garage space. Thank you.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Fisher. So the distance, if you take it from the existing barn, is approximately 45 metres to the side boundary of the existing property. Now, obviously, these properties will be slightly closer. I don't have a definite figure, but from my measurements, I'd suggest it's at the very least 35 metres, if not more than that. And of course, at the first floor as well, just to reiterate, there is only a bathroom window proposed there. Ground floor windows wouldn't lead to any overlooking, because there would be fencing and hedging in there as well. And then in terms of the condition to limit the occupation of the garages, well, by removing the permitted development rights of them, that in effect does that already. So that condition is on there. So if they wanted to come in for planning, they would have to apply for planning permission to convert those.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I have to agree that if this should get approved, that I would I'd like to see some form of screening put in place. It must have been such a shock for those neighbours to have had those Leylandii, as much as they're Leylandii. It must have been such a shock to see them disappear like that, and nothing put in its place. So I'd much prefer to see something green than something wood as a fence.
So sorry, Chair, just my peace of mind. Can the officer tell me which elevation is facing that screen?
Would you like the screen back up again?
Well, I've got the plans here. If you just tell me which elevation faces the Wroxham Road properties.
Well, perhaps if I just share the screen so that everyone can see if that's okay. Yeah. There we go. So you'll see that the properties that we've been talking about, Abbey Court to the west, are here. And then the ones opposite Wroxham Road are the elevations are from here to here, and they're clearly set a reasonable distance away. So if we go to the elevations on that we have, sorry, let me just go back quickly. So
yeah, that one.
This is plot 2 facing there, and then plot 1, it would be this elevation here.
Sorry, go back to plot 2, would you please?
Sorry, yeah, of course. There we go.
So you're saying that south elevation will be facing the Roxham Road properties?
Yeah, so the property's on the opposite side of Roxham Road, yes. So if we go back to the site plan, sorry, just they're not next to each other unhelpfully. Those elevations we just looked at would be here, and across here facing these, but just, well, primarily this one property and that distance. I'm sorry, I don't know that distance, but that's where they'd be facing, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so any further discussion? Okay, Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm still somewhat confused by these trees. If we go to 5.5 on page 81, hopefully Ben can pick this up. I'll give us some more detail. It states in there, it is understood that the applicant is required to remove this as part of his purchase of the site. Why would anybody be required to remove trees in order to purchase a piece of land from the previous owner? I really don't understand. And the screening was there, and really, as others have voiced, can we not get some screening back for those residents?
Yeah, certainly. I'll answer in only by saying that I don't know the full details of that land deal. Sorry, it's not necessarily to do with the planning permission. I think that one of the residents or the applicant may well be able to help. I don't know, Chair. Leave it to you whether you feel as though it's appropriate or not.
It's as much as I find it incredible that somebody would sell a property and say you've got to cut those trees down to get the land through, then, but I can't see that we can discuss that at this moment in time. So no, so we'll move on with the discussions in relation to the application. So is there anything else that anybody would like to put forward before we go to the vote? Okay, thank you. So we have, Leah, just confirm that I haven't missed anybody. No, okay. So it's been proposed by Councillor Ward and seconded by Councillor Leggett that we should, as a committee, agree to approve this application subject to the conditions on page 84 of your papers. And can I just confirm, Officer Mellors, are we putting another condition on there to say that there should be some kind of screening?
There is already a condition, as Ben has said, for screening to be put on the boundary. We are saying there does need to be fencing and hedging on that boundary, but we're not saying it has to be substantial trees, because in my opinion, that wouldn't be reasonable or necessary. We couldn't ask for like replacements, but what we're making sure is that there would be screening, and that would be natural screening on that boundary, and that's controlled by that condition.
Okay, that's lovely. Just wanted to confirm that. Okay, that we should, as a committee, agree to approve this application subject to conditions on page 84 of your papers. Officer Matthews, could you proceed with the roll call, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So if members could indicate if they are for or against the proposal to approve. Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Beadle.
For.
Councillor Brennan.
Against.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Folger.
For.
Councillor Karimi Guvenlou.
Against.
Councillor Lawn.
For.
Councillor Leggett.
For.
Councillor Prutton.
For.
Councillor Riley.
Against.
And Councillor Ward.
For.
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 4, 1, 3. So that's 8 members voting for and 3 against, Chairman, so that's carried.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. Members of the public, it's really much appreciated that you've attended. Okay, we will now move on to our 4th and final application this morning, and the application number is 2020 to 2317 Woodview, 81 Fakenham Road, Great Witchingham. We don't have any public speakers for this application this morning, so Officer Rook, we will proceed with the presentation. Thank you.
Certainly, let's go to the presentation. This is for a subdivision of a plot to erection of 2 detached dwellings with garage in and new vehicular access. This is a full application on property Woodview, 81 Fakenham Road, Great Witchingham. Looking for my, sorry, for my cursors to appear. There they are. This is the site itself outlined in red. You can see this is part of the garden area of number 81 here. So we're at the end of Moores Close, cul-de-sac development of bungalows on the south side, chalets on the northern side, and the context of development surrounding the site, number 81 and number 83. So we've got residential development to the west and the east and the north. Moving a little bit closer, you start to see the context of the site itself. I mentioned about the bungalows on the southern side of Moores Close. This proposal is not actually seeking to access along Moores Close, actually seeking to gain an access on Fakenham Road about this point here. See through the report, the site is outside of the settlement limit. We're just on the western edge of the settlement limit, just in this point here, within the settlement of Lemwade and Great Witchingham. The report also refers to an earlier approval. This was reported and approved at committee in November 2019 for 2 dwellings with this arrangement at that time. With the entrance onto Fakenham Road at that point, a chalet on plot 1 and a bungalow on plot 2. At that time, there was a significant part of the site, this sort of unusual part, which was excluded from the application site because at that time the applicant didn't have ownership of that land. Since this was approved, the applicant now does have ownership of that land, which is why he's made another application to include that. But I just wanted, first of all, to show you the context of the previous approval and then to show you the current proposal. So these were the house types for the previous. You notice the reference 2019-0582 is the previous. So this is the chalet on plot 1, which has the sort of frontage to Fakenham Road and picks up on the scale and form of the neighbouring properties on that side of the site. And then on plot 2, we have a bungalow. And at that time, the bungalow had an attached garage on the side. You can see the forms of those properties, and it was designed really to reflect the neighbouring properties either side of those properties. This is now the location plan for the 2020-2317. So you can see this area is now included within the application site, and that allows the development site to be extended and now to be provided with a set of garages. So although each of the plots, plot 1 has a couple of open parking spaces at the front, plot 2 has a couple of open parking spaces to the front, they're also now provided with their own garage in. And it just allows a little bit more sort of freedom of manoeuvring in that central part of the site, which we consider to be advantageous over the previous scheme, albeit that was approved, but the additional land now does just assist with some of those aspects. But the other thing just to mention while I've got this slide in front of us, you can still see chalet arranged in that same form on plot 1. The bungalow on plot 2 has been extended because, as I showed you on the previous scheme, we had an attached garage on the side. No longer need to have the attached garage in that position. So that's now living accommodation for the bungalow, as the garage in is now provided. I think plot 2 has one of the halves of the garage and the carport, whereas plot 1 just has a single garage in that position there. These are the proposed house types. So you can once again see chalet on plot 1, picking up on the dormer form. That's the front elevation. So that's the elevation facing Fakenham Road, and that's the rear elevation. And then on the bungalow itself, I would say no longer got the attached garage. It's just a living accommodation across that extent of development now. Small projecting gables on the front, larger projecting gables on the rear, and the form of the garage That would be the garage for plot 1, the chalet. That's the garage for the bungalow. And this is an open carport, which also goes with the bungalow. Photographs of the site. So this is at Fakenham Road, showing the view, and an entrance will be formed in that part of the fence there to allow access into the site. No proximity to the bus stop on the Fakenham Road. That's the position that was previously approved under the last application. So that's consistent with the previous approval. The view the other way, picking up, as I said, on the dormer, on the chalet form, which would be in this position here for plot 1, with the similar form of dormers as the neighbouring properties have got. Then moving into the site, so this is roughly area of plot 1, boundary down the side here for the existing property number 81, with the driveway running here, garage in that central position, and then the bungalow, which would then be running in that position in the distance there. Looking back the other way, so stood in a position, roughly a position of where the plot 1 would be here, garage in this position. So you see the context of the surroundings, which officers feel can accommodate the development without detriment to character and appearance of the area. And then that's the neighbouring property, number 5, Moores Close. And the proposed bungalow would be sitting in a position across roughly about this sort of position here. That's the host property, number 81. So you can see this is all the garden area for number 81. New boundary would be provided roughly about this position here. Still gives number 81 a good sized garden, whilst also allowing 2 dwellings to be built on that part of the site. And this is the view from Moores Close. As I said, no actual access from the development site onto Moores Close. It just shows the context once again of the bungalow properties. Proposed bungalow would be sitting in about this position here. The chalet you can't just see on the right hand side there. I think that's the final slide of the presentation. Just going to the report then. As you can see from the report, this application is a resubmission of a similar development approved in 2019. This current application having an enlarged site area, given the additional land that's now been included. The application is reported to committee as it's recommended for approval, contrary to the policies of the development plan. The site is located outside, but immediately adjacent to the settlement limit, which runs along the site's western boundary. Planning history of the site is an important consideration in this case. Section 2 of the report sets out the site has had full planning permission in 2016 and 2019 for 2 dwellings, each being served by a new access from the Fakenham Road. An earlier application in 2015 for 2 dwellings to be served from Moores Close to the east was refused, so that was this position here, was refused and dismissed at appeal due to highway safety issues. Just off the plan here, this roadway continues, but the visibility onto the Fakenham Road is restricted by a neighbouring property, and that's why the access is now coming in this position. The 2019 full approval, which was also for a bungalow and a chalet of similar design, was approved at committee in December 2019 and has a 3-year permission, so it is extant until December 2022. This is a significant material consideration that must be taken into account in the determination of the current application. There is one update to the report, which is set out in your supplementary schedule, as the applicant has requested an extra condition be imposed in respect of details of the boundary treatments, which could allow the type of boundary enclosure, not its position, to be revised in agreement with officers. Turning to the assessment, key considerations are principle of development, design, impact on amenity, highway safety and parking. As stated, principle of the development, the site is outside of the settlement limit. Policy GC2 of the DMDPD seeks to locate new development within settlement limits, whilst policy GC1 seeks a presumption in favour of sustainable development. The proposal is therefore contrary to policy GC2 due to its location and as there are no other allocations or policies of the plan which permit it. It should be noted the council is able to demonstrate in excess of a 5-year supply of housing, and as such the council is operating a plan-led approach. However, as previously explained, the site does benefit from an extant full permission until December 2022. for a similar form of development. And in officer's opinion, this is a significant material consideration, which leads to the principal development being acceptable in this instance. In terms of the impact of the proposals on the character and appearance of the area, it's noted there's a variety of dwelling types and styles in the locality, as the dwellings to the south of Moors Close are detached bungalows and the dwellings to the north are detached chalets. Numbers 81 and 83 to the west are detached houses. It is considered the additional land that is now included in the application site, benefits the layout as parking and manoeuvring space is increased. I consider the proposed dwellings accord with the established character and appearance of the area, given the dwelling on plot 2 is a bungalow next to the existing bungalow, and the dwelling on plot 1 is a chalet next to the existing chalet. The access directly onto Fakenham Road has previously been approved but not implemented. It's noted that objections have been received from the neighbours at numbers 5 Moors Close and 79 Fakenham Road. However, on balance, given the scale and design of the proposed dwellings, the spacing to the site boundaries, the boundary treatments to the neighbouring properties, and the earlier permission, it is considered there is no unacceptable impact on residential amenities of neighbours or future occupiers. Finally, it's noted the Highway Authority raised no objection, subject to the imposition of conditions which are to be imposed. In conclusion, although the proposal is contrary to the Council's policies due to its location outside the settlement limit, it is considered the proposal respects the character and appearance of the area. There is no significant detrimental impact on residential amenities or highway safety. And the extant planning permission is a significant material consideration, which in this case warrants approval at odds with the plan-led approach. Accordingly, the proposals are considered to represent an acceptable form of development. Recommendation is to approve, subject to the conditions as listed in the agenda, together with the additional condition in respect to the boundary treatments as set out in the supplementary schedule on page 97 of your agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And as we don't have any members of the public, we can go into our open discussion in relation to this application. And Officer Mellors and Officer Rook are here should you need to have any questions answered. I need to go back onto my full screen. Apologies, I had to change screens whilst that presentation was going on, but I didn't leave the room and I had the other one going at the same time. Okay, so sorry, anything that they want to say in relation to this? Councillor Riley?
Thank you. I'd just like to say to Matthew, he's on a roll today because that presentation again was spot on. Again,
thank you very much.
I know, Matthew.
You're softening me up for something, Kieran, aren't you? No, you're going to send me a nasty email this afternoon.
Yeah, I send you an apple in the post as well. Yeah, just spot on. I mean, the presentation again, and of course, the material consideration here under planning policy is the previous permission that Matthew's already mentioned, and therefore, without further ado, Chair, I propose that we accept this application, the officer's recommendation.
And that's Councillor Karim. Yes, okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much. Members, do you have anything else that you need to discuss in relation to this before we go to the vote? No. Councillor Proton?
It's just a quick question of Matthew. This additional supplementary schedule with the officers have no objection to the additional condition. They're talking about adding additional boundary treatments. What are they putting in place, or what are they adding to what's already there?
Okay.
They must have got a guilty conscience about something.
No, as part of the application, they did submit a plan. They submitted a plan that showed the boundary treatments. One of the boundaries, the internal boundary between the site and number 81, so the host dwelling, is shown on that boundary treatment plan as a 1.8 metre high wall. What the applicant would like flexibility over is whether that boundary treatment has to be a wall or whether it could be a fence.
Oh, I see. Okay, and you're happy, of course, with that?
It's internal to the site.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
Understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
No problem, thank you. Okay, nothing else to discuss? Okay, fine, thank you. We will now move on to the recommendation, and it's been recommended by Councillor Riley and seconded by Councillor Freeman-Guban-Liu that we as a committee should agree to approve this application subject to conditions on page 93 of your papers. Officer Matthews, could you do the roll call, please?
Thank you. So, Chairman, members could indicate if they are for or against. So it's Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Beadle.
For.
Councillor Brennan.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Folger.
For.
Councillor Creamy-Given-Liu.
For.
Councillor Lawn.
For.
Councillor Leggett.
For.
Councillor Prutton.
For.
Councillor Riley.
For.
And Councillor Ward.
For.
Chairman, that's unanimous. It's carried.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much. And that completes our applications for today. We will move on to agenda item number 6. And if I could briefly ask Helen to just go through the appeals that have been placed and listed. Thank you.
I'm just going to hand that back to Matt, actually, because I think he'd done the prep.
Oh,
for
I'm
that.
sorry.
So, no, that's absolutely fine. I think he's got more up-to-date knowledge on that for you.
No, that's fine. Yep. So you, as normal, you can see that on the page 94 of your agenda, we've got the appeal decisions received. The first two referred to Merry Hill Caravan Park. Some members may know that, out between Hoddenham and Ringland. We had 2 certificates of lawfulness there. The first one was concerning the manager's dwelling on the site, where the owners sought to remove the occupancy, or sought to argue that the occupancy condition was no longer valid. We refused that, and that was dismissed at appeal, at a hearing. The second one was also at Merry Hill, was the caravan park, where the owners sought to prove that the caravans could be used as the sole or main place of residence at the caravan park. Once again, we refused that, and that was also dismissed at appeal. So that's the first 2. Third one, 159 Plumstead Road, is a householder extensions to the first floor, the rear, and the single story. That was refused, but allowed at appeal. Officers were initially concerned about the sort of the scale and the character and appearance. However, the inspector considered that there was enough variety within the street to allow that. The Dog Lane one is 3 self-built dwellings adjacent to the settlement limit. Officers refused that because of the plan-led approach outside the settlement limit, and also there's no footpath associated with that, so people would have to walk in the road to get to the nearest footpath. However, the inspector has allowed that one. He felt that there was a short enough distance between the site and the footpath to justify approval for 3 self-built dwellings. That's outlined, so obviously we'll have the reserved matters application for that one come through. Next one's Rectory Road at Coltishall, 9 self-built dwellings. That was an outline application which officers refused outside of settlement limit, and the inspector has dismissed that, agreeing that the adverse harm on the character and appearance of the area. And finally, 56 Conan Deep Lane, a dwelling. It was a dwelling to the rear of the existing property in its rear garden. Officers refused that, and that was also dismissed by the inspector on grounds of harmful impact on the character and appearance of the locality. It's a bit of a mixed bag. Some obviously, what's that? Out of the 6, 4 dismissed and 2 allowed. But yeah, learn from the ones that have been allowed. But pleased that we managed to have the other ones dismissed. And then appeals lodged. We've got 3 applications on page 95. Members may know this one. It was refused under delegated powers for 47 dwellings at Horsford. It's the southern end of Horsford, near where the new roundabout's gone in, which then links off to the Broadland Northway. Officers refused that, partly because we had our 5-year supply, but also because of its for quite a significant distance from Horsford itself. It's right on the southern edge of Horsford. We felt it was too far for pedestrian access back to the facilities and the schools and things like that in Horsford. So that's been was refused. We'll wait on the inspector's comments on that. And then the others are subdivisions of plots for single dwellings, one at Little Plumstead and one at Elsham, both refused under delegated powers. So we'll await the outcome, and obviously once we get those, we'll report those outcomes to you. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fisher would like to ask a question, please.
Thank you. Yeah, just reference application 159 Plumstead Road. Could I have the report on that? Because I had discussions with officers and didn't agree with the fact they were refusing it. So I know at one time we did used to get reports as local members from the planning inspector. I've no idea whether they do, whether it has come through and I've missed it. But
yeah, we can send it. It's uploaded to the website, so it'll be on the website if you want to see it on the website.
As a rule, we do, Chair, try and send them out to the local members when they are received and you as the Chair, so we'll make sure that is still in place. But as Matt said, they are always published on the website. So anything you see here listed that you've got an interest in, if you click on the number, you'll get access to it on the website. But as a rule, we will try and just send them to the local members for information when they come in. So we'll make sure that's looked at.
We did used to get it, so it would be good if that was to start. I haven't had one for a long, probably we haven't had many in Thorpe, but yeah, I think that's something that we should.
I can make sure our admin team do that when they send them to the office. They send them to the local member. And
the other thing is that because John isn't. Oh yeah, you are Plumstead Road. It is your area, isn't it? No, I was thinking that it was my area, but it's your area.
That is why I had extensive discussions with the officers at the time.
Apologies. Okay. So,
Chair,
Councillor Riley?
just on this, on this point. So you're absolutely right. I remember, you used to get these quite some time ago, and we haven't. But also going back even further, and it seems I'm not sure what's happened here, but any planning committee member used to get sent the decisions anyway, whether you was a local ward member or not, if you was on the planning committee, because obviously we're on the planning committee and we need to be mindful of what's going on, and keep a track of what was allowed or dismissed under delegated authority, but also importantly what's been allowed and dismissed under committee decisions as well. And
that's why that's why we've actually introduced the list for you every month, so you get a list of all the decisions as the planning committee, so you're fully aware of what's been made and how that's been made. We didn't used to do that, so that's an addition that we have actually added to your agenda papers. But certainly we can ask, certainly and then obviously you can always look on the link to the website, but I'm quite happy to ask that actually when the decisions are received, we send them through to the local member.
Okay,
and then you've got the list that comes through monthly on a monthly basis.
I'm just conscious that we're still in full planning, so we can close the meeting now and